Chapter 107. The next chapter will be at around 10 p.m. East Emperor Palace. Li Qianlon's eyes twitched. When he heard these three words, he immediately thought of Dongxing Huangtu. This name, full of mysteries and contradictions, had been suppressed in his heart. But as the name of Master of Samsara Palace came out, Li Qianlon's inner doubts began to surge in his heart again. It was rumored that the mysterious and powerful master of Samsara Palace had been recognized as one of the strongest invincible realm experts in the dark world after she killed Tian Exant, the dominator of the invincible realm of Night Spirit, with Blue Sky Underworld in her hand. The Divine List and the Holy List in the Dark World were ranked every 10 years, but they were fine-tuned all the time. Tian Exant was originally ranked 10th on the Divine List. Now that he was dead, another invincible realm expert was bound to take his place. And the ranking of Master of Samsara Palace would definitely be in the top 5 after the fine-tuning. The ranking of this year's Divine and Holy List had become one of the focuses of the superpowers in the Dark World. This matter directly involved how much benefit the superpowers could get from dividing up Night Spirit. To some extent, the ranking of Master of Samsara Palace on the Divine List was directly related to how much Samsara could expand after the destruction of Night Spirit. Li Tianlon was a little lost in thought. He thought of Samsara, Qin Weibai, and the mysterious palace master in front of him. At present, she could be said to be the invincible realm expert who showed up the least in the Dark World. She was usually nowhere to be seen, as if she was hiding in the ninth heaven. Her movements were earth-shattering. Judging from her current status, it was not an exaggeration to say that she was the strongest woman in the Dark World. Did such a person have anything to do with Dongxing Huangtu? If the answer was yes, it seemed to explain why Qin Weibai could know the name that even Dongchang Xiuqi didn't know and had as relics. But Qin Weibai clearly told him that she had seen Dongchang Huangtu, which Li Tianlon didn't understand. East Emperor Palace. East Emperor Palace. Li Tianlon pondered for a full 5 minutes. It was not until Wang Yuedong quietly pulled his sleeve that he suddenly came to his senses and said in a sincere and respectful tone, "Thank you, Palace Master. I like this name very much. Let's call it East Emperor Palace." The Master of Samsara Palace was silent. She looked at Li Tianlon for a while, and then turned her head again. There was no aura of peerless elegance, no aura of invincibility, no weakness of being seriously injured and dying. On the screen, she stood quietly, but she looked like a black cloak, empty and lifeless. The camera rotated. Qin Weibai's face appeared on the screen again. "Did you miss me?" Qin Weibai asked softly, with a little playfulness in her gentle tone. "With my sister around, I'm afraid you've already forgotten me, haven't you?" Hearing this clearly, Wang Yuetong blushed and moved further away. "I haven't forgotten. I've been thinking about it." Li Tianlon looked embarrassed, and cold sweat began to drip from his forehead. He could not tell what kind of emotion was contained in Qin Weibai's tone, but it was precisely because of this that he became even more nervous. There were some feelings that had nothing to do with fear. It was only because one truly cared. Did he care? Li Tianlon asked himself in his heart. Looking at Wang Yuedong, he suddenly laughed at himself and felt that he was really shameless. "Look at how scared you are. I don't mean anything else, but you can't not even let me ask, can you?" Qin Weibai smiled slightly, and her beauty was enough to topple a nation. "Is it enough for the two of us?" She was silent for a while and suddenly said. Li Tianlon suddenly thought of the Dongchang clan and Dongxing Rushi, whom he had not met yet. His intuition told him that it must be a mess. But at this time, even if he was a fool, he knew that he could not say it was not enough. So he nodded without hesitation and said seriously, "It's enough. It's enough. You're so hypocritical." Qin Weibai's eyes were misty, and her cold voice with some hidden bitterness seemed to be floating, as if to drill into people's hearts. "You men, it's okay to have one. If there's a second one, there will definitely be a third one. When I'm done here, I must take care of you." Li Tianlon nodded with a smile and said softly, "Okay." Qin Weibai looked at him quietly for a while and said softly, "I'm hanging up. When my sister recovers, I'll go back to see you. You also have to manage your team well. East Emperor Palace. Huh. I'm waiting for the day to call you His Majesty East Emperor. East Emperor Palace. East Emperor. Dongqing Huang too. It seemed that from the first time he heard the name, he began to connect with the deceased heavenly son, and as time went by, the connection seemed to have become closer and closer. Li Tianlan held the phone, a little lost in thought. His Majesty East Emperor. The word His Majesty was almost a special word for Wang Tianzong of the Wang family of Beihai. If it was used on him, Li Tianlan smiled and shook his head. The motivation of this title was really not trivial. Senior brother, is it East Emperor Palace? Wang Yuetong blinked and looked at Li Tianlan and asked. Li Tianlan nodded and looked at Wang Yuetong. What do you think? It's good. Wang Yuetong smiled and said, I like the name East Emperor. People say that my father is Sword Emperor. It sounds good. Sounds good. Li Tianlan didn't say much and said slowly, call Qiansheng and Beitian. We should discuss it together. By the way, Qiansheng has entered the fire-flaming realm, right? I saw him once yesterday, but he drove me away before I had time to ask. You asked Qingyan. Wang Yuetong smiled playfully. Ask me what? Yu Qingyan walked out of the kitchen and asked in confusion, looking at Li Tianlan and Wang Yuetong, who were sitting very close to each other. Her pure face blushed slightly. She avoided looking at Li Tianlan and Wang Yuetong. Li Tianlan was also a little embarrassed. When a man was dominated by his upper body and when he was dominated by his lower body, he was in two completely different states. Otherwise, there would be no so-called saint mode. He pretended to smile naturally and said, Is the meal ready? It will take a while. Yu Qingyan shook her head. She was quiet and well-behaved. No matter in cooking or martial arts, Yu Qingyan had been taught by Yu Donglai. Even for breakfast, Yu Qingyan strived for perfection and was particular about the timing and heat control. The dishes made in this way, even if it was just plain porridge, had a special taste. However, impatient people might not be able to wait that long. That's just right. Call them back and let's discuss it together. Li Tianlan said excitedly. He was extremely excited to have his own foundation. Strictly speaking, the Liu family was now his property. But in the end, it belonged to the Liu family. Liu Tianjing, Liu Shen, and others seemed to have no choice at present, but there was still the possibility of repetition. Even if the possibility was small, it still existed. But the East Emperor Palace, which was about to be established, was different. It completely belonged to him. As long as he was willing to work hard, it would be his territory in the future. Li Tianlan had no reason not to look forward to the future of the East Emperor Palace. Then I'll call them. Wang Yuetong took out her mobile phone. Before she started dialing, the doorbell rang again. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. He thought it was a secret service agency like Huiyin and 3i, so he didn't think much about it. He patted the little princess's extremely round buttocks wrapped in white tights and said calmly, Open the door. Wang Yuetong, wearing a pair of pink slippers, trotted to open the door with a smile. When she saw the person outside the door, she was stunned. Second uncle? Why are you here? Wang Yuetong said in a panic, and then her face became a little pale. Are you here to take me back? Wang Xiaoyao, who was outside the door, was even more surprised. After a long silence, his face slowly darkened and his eyes became stern. Have you already lived with that guy? Yes. Wang Yuetong raised her little face. Her face was pale, but her tone was extremely firm. I'm already senior brother's woman. It was last night. Second uncle, I won't go back. Wang Xiaoyao, who didn't expect this at all, seemed to be stunned with anger. He was not mentally prepared at all. After a while, he said angrily, Bastard! You wicked girl! Do you want to piss your father off? Wang Yuetong bit her lip hard and stubbornly looked at Wang Xiaoyao. She just kept repeating, I won't go back, I won't go back. Wang Xiaoyao's face was cloudy and uncertain. He stood outside the door in silence. Wang Yuetong's appearance here was too unexpected. All kinds of emotions, such as anger, disappointment, jealousy, and disbelief, gushed out from his heart at the same time. His brain was in a mess, and he even forgot his original purpose of coming here. How many days had it been? The most beautiful little cabbage in the Wang family of Beihai had been turned over by Li Tianlan. It was simply King ridiculous. Mr. Wang, please come in. Li Tianlan walked in from the living room and looked at Wang Xiaoyao standing outside the door. Although he was surprised in his heart, he looked as calm as water and greeted him. Wang Xiaoyao glared at Wang Yuetong and walked in with a sullen face. He looked at Li Tianlan with an unkind expression. After a while, he said coldly, "Do you know what the consequences are for blaspheming the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai?" Wang Yuetong's face became even paler. Although she knew this day would come, it still came so soon, which was somewhat beyond her expectation. She opened her mouth and was about to speak, but Li Tianlan had already said calmly, "Mr. Wang, if you're here to talk about this, then there's no need to talk about it. In some things, we have to respect the wishes of the parties involved, right?" Wang Xiaoyao subconsciously narrowed his eyes, and he was surprised. When he first met Li Tianlan, in Wang Xiaoyao's impression, he seemed to be just an overly quiet young man. Even when Taoist Xian Xuanzi said that he had the appearance of a heavenly son, Wang Xiaoyao didn't notice anything extraordinary about him. But now that they met again, this young man actually had a hint of sharpness that even he had to take seriously. It was sharpness, not momentum. In his eyes, this Li Tianlan might still be very immature, but it was a completely different feeling from the first time they met. Wang Xiaoyao was silent, trying to calm his inner anger. After his mind calmed down a little, he finally remembered his purpose. He glared at Wang Yuetong again and said in a sullen tone, "Yuetong, take Qingyan out first. I have something to talk to Tianlan." Wang Yuetong looked at Li Tianlan, a little hesitant. Seeing the scene with his own eyes, Wang Xiaoyao felt more and more helpless. A married daughter was like spilled water. It sounded like nothing, but when one really felt it, it was simply indescribable. Qin Weibai, Wang Yuetong. Why did they all like this guy like a demon? Wang Xiaoyao's heart suddenly tightened, and his face turned pale, but he still tried to suppress his anger and jealousy. "Go, and find Beitian and Qiansheng by the way." Li Tianlan nodded with a smile and said lightly. Wang Yuetong nodded obediently and waved at Yu Qingyan. The two walked out of the dormitory one after the other. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Xiaoyao, who was still standing in the same place, and said without changing his expression, "Mr. Wang, please." Wang Xiaoyao walked into the living room without saying a word, sat on the sofa, and remained silent. Li Tianlan politely poured him a glass of water and did not speak. Perhaps just as Wang Xiaoyao would not like him no matter how he looked at him, the more he looked at Wang Xiaoyao, the more uncomfortable he became. In Wang Xiaoyao's mind, he might be a rival in love who had occupied his goddess. But in Li Tianlan's mind, how could a person who still wanted to hit on his own woman be a good person? They disliked each other, and that was the real relationship between them. "I really should kill you." Wang Xiaoyao was silent for a long time, and then he gritted his teeth and said, "In this way, Little Bai won't be confused, and Yuetong won't be confused." Li Tianlan smiled. He was not generous enough, but he would not compete with Wang Xiaoyao for such a few words. In Zhongzhou State, the Wang family of Beihai was no longer a superpower that could be accurately described as a behemoth. It was deeply rooted and flourishing. It was such a towering tree. Before he grew up, it was best not to have a conflict. So he just nodded and said calmly, "You have the ability, but I don't want to face the consequences." Wang Xiaoyao shook his head, handed Li Tianlan a cigarette, and said coldly, "If I kill you, I don't think I'll live long. This is not about you and me, but about Samsara Palace and the Wang family of Beihai. I don't want to die, but I'm not afraid of death. But I'm afraid of becoming a sinner in the glorious history of the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years. I'm afraid that Little Bai will hate me for the rest of her life. This is worse than death." Li Tianlan smoked in silence. If he died in the hands of Wang Xiaoyao, the furious Qin Weibai would retaliate against the Wang family of Beihai at all costs. It would be far more bloody and tragic than the battle in which Samsara destroyed Night's spirit. Wang Xiaoyao did not dare to make a move. It was not that he lacked courage, but that he could not make a move because of his duty. Let's get down to business. Li Tianlan took a drag on the cigarette and said calmly, Qin Wei Bai was an unattainable goddess in Wang Xiaoyao's mind, but she was his woman. Li Tianlan did not need to discuss his woman with other men. In this matter, Wang Xiaoyao was not qualified to do so. Wang Xiaoyao took a deep look at Li Tianlan. In a short time, he seemed to have completely adjusted his emotions, and his smile became gentle and humble. I just saw tribulation. Wang Xiaoyao said softly. I want to exchange something with him. He said that you can make the decision, so I want to ask your opinion. Oh. Li Tianlan smoked in silence and did not say anything. I want to exchange for tribulation shadow formula. Maybe I don't need the whole shadow formula, just half of it. I need a shadow. Wang Xiaoyao's tone was easygoing. Li Tianlan smoked and still did not speak. Sometimes silence was the best attitude. It was not a promise or a refusal, but at least it left a little room. He did not ask what Wang Xiaoyao wanted to trade, nor did he ask what he wanted to do. But in silence, he casually took the initiative of the conversation. Wang Xiaoyao sighed softly. No matter what he thought of Li Tianlan, he could not deny that this young man could really keep his composure. I can exchange a core unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai for half of the shadow formula. If you are willing, no matter what the situation is in the future, I am willing to do my best to help you do one thing within my ability. Although I don't like you, the promise of the Wang family of Beihai disregards enemies and friends, and I will do what I say. Wang Xiaoyao looked at Li Tianlan with a smile. I think my conditions are very sincere. I don't need the whole shadow formula, nor do I need a shadow to imitate my movements. I just need a shadow, and even a favor. I don't think you will suffer a loss in any case. I need this shadow to save my life, so... He did not go on, but Li Tianlan had already understood what he meant. Wang Xiaoyao put forward a good enough condition to exchange half of the unique skill that could save his life. Tribulation pushed the problem to Li Tianlan. If Li Tianlan exchanged, at least this time, it was a pleasant cooperation. But if he did not, it was clear that he wanted Wang Xiaoyao to die. When he got out of this door, Wang Xiaoyao would not be polite to Li Tianlan. He might not kill him, but with his power, he had plenty of ways to make Li Tianlan extremely uncomfortable. As for who was more reasonable behind this matter, the dark world was short of everything, but the last thing it needed was reason. Master Tribulation said that I can make the decision. Li Tianlan was silent for a while, and then said softly, You can call and ask for confirmation. Wang Xiaoyao nodded. And I don't have to lie to you. The half-shadow formula that was traded and the half-shadow formula that was obtained through deception were completely different. At the very least, this would completely offend Sai City. The Wang family of Beihai was more powerful than Sai City, but no one was willing to provoke such an assassin organization when it was not necessary. No need. I can promise you. Li Tianlan shook his head and said in a straightforward tone, I'll sort it out and give you the half-shadow formula. Great. Wang Xiaoyao laughed, took out an envelope from his arms, and handed it to Li Tianlan. He said with a smile, Sort of emperor path from the Wang family of Beihai. You can study it. Li Tianlan did not stand on ceremony. He took it and nodded. Sword of Emperor Path was not the most powerful unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, but it was worthy of the name of the core unique skill. This deal was indeed not a loss. By the way, I have a message for you. Wang Xiaoyao continued to say with a smile, Tianlan, do you know Ning Ziyuan? General Ning Ziyuan, the commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations in Zhongzhou State, was one of the military giants and Ning Qianqing's father. How could Li Tianlan not know such a figure? Ning Ziyuan had been riding high in recent days. After the deputy commander's old rival, Tan Xinghua, was transferred to the Southern Theater of Operations, Yi Fenglin, the deputy commander of the Southern Theater of Operations, came to the Eastern Theater of Operations. He was a real, capable general of the Southeast Group. Such a transfer was now also understood as a move by the Wang family of Beihai to take over the Eastern Theater of Operations and consolidate the group's advantage in the southeast coastal provinces of Zhongzhou State. Wang Xiaoyao looked at Li Tianlan with burning eyes and said with a smile, Xin Xuanzi, once met Ning Ziyuan. Do you want to know what the Taoist said about him? He took a sip of water and continued to say with a smile, "He is rebellious and has the look of a rebel." Wang Xiaoyao looked at Li Tianlan and said softly, "My goddess was taken away by you. I have to do something in my life, right?" Li Tianlan frowned slightly. Although he did not understand Wang Xiaoyao's meaning, it was obvious from his attitude that he did not intend to explain anything to him. The look of a rebel? Li Tianlan shook his head, still somewhat puzzled. The Wang family of Beihai was full of ambitious and ruthless people. That was how the Wang family had built its glory for hundreds of years. Wang Tianzong was an ambitious and ruthless person. As Wang Tianzong's younger brother, even if Wang Xiaoyao's performance was mediocre, how could he really be so mediocre? Ambitious and ruthless people were unpredictable, and the heart of an ambitious and ruthless person was undoubtedly even more unpredictable. Ning Zon, the look of a rebel. Thinking of these two keywords, Li Tianxia subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Chapter 108. Holding the sword manual of Sword of Emperor Path from the Wang family of Beihai, Li Tianlan let Wang Xiaoyao wait for 6 or 7 hours before he gave him the half-style of shadow formula. It was not that Li Tianlan deliberately neglected him, but that it was a very energy-consuming thing for him. Tribulation's Buddhist incantation of 9 words was exquisite and treacherous. Although it was unconventional, it was as sharp as a sword, sharp enough to split the sky. Each style was extremely profound. For Li Tianlan, who had just come into contact with the Buddhist incantation of 9 words, sorting out the half-style of shadow formula was not only a test of his vision, but also his understanding and analytical ability. Li Tianlan could not destroy his credibility for this kind of deal. He would give what he should give, but he did not want to give any more if he could avoid it. What Wang Xiaoyao needed was just a shadow. How to help him achieve his goal without revealing a little more of the essence of shadow formula was definitely a test for Li Tianlan, and it could also deepen his understanding of shadow formula. Therefore, Li Tianlan shut himself in the bedroom all morning, digesting the essence of shadow formula bit by bit. He did not eat breakfast or lunch. It was not until 3 o'clock in the afternoon that he walked out of the bedroom with the carefully sorted shadow formula. Wang Xiaoyao was still sitting in his original position. It seemed that he had not moved or changed his posture since Li Tianlan went in. Seeing Li Tianlan come out, he looked up with a smile and said calmly, "Done?" Li Tianlan nodded and handed a page of A4 paper to Wang Xiaoyao. "It's all here." His voice was a little tired, but there was also a trace of joy. After several hours and a night of meditation, he had a general understanding of shadow formula. As one of the core of the Buddhist incantation of 9 words, how to form a shadow was the key. Although it was extremely difficult, it was only the basic of the shadow formula. How to make the shadow move and even imitate his own movements was the essence and the most difficult part. Li Tianlan was extremely stingy with the half-style of shadow formula that he sorted out for Wang Xiaoyao. Even if he succeeded in practicing such a shadow formula, he could only form a shadow at most, and he could exchange positions with the shadow once. As for doing anything else, it was basically impossible, but it was enough to meet Wang Xiaoyao's needs. He glanced at the information in his hand, and his eyes lit up slightly. After a moment of silence, he reached out to Li Tianlan and said with a smile, "It's a pleasure to cooperate with you." Li Tianlan reached out and shook hands with him, his expression indifferent. Wang Xiaoyao took a deep look at him and carefully put away the information in his hand. He smiled again and said, "Let's talk about our grievances later. As for our deal, the Wang clan's Sword of Emperor Path mustn't be revealed easily." Li Tianlan didn't think there was any grudge between him and the Wang family of Beihai. When it came to Wang Xiaoyao, it could only be regarded as a nod in his heart. However, he didn't bother to say anything more. He knew that the latter half of Wang Xiaoyao's sentence was to remind him to keep the deal a secret. He nodded hastily, looking a little perfunctory. Without another word, Wang Xiaoyao turned around and left. When he was about to step out of the door, he suddenly looked back at Li Tianlan in front of him and said meaningfully, Tianlan, do you know what a rebel looks like? Mr. Wang, please speak your mind. Li Tianlan's heart was in turmoil, but he looked calmer and calmer on the surface. Wang Xiaoyao laughed and said no more. He turned around and left directly. Li Tianlan looked at his back and frowned. After thinking for a while, he still couldn't get the gist of it. Shaking his head, he took out his mobile phone and sent a message to Wang Yuetong. Then he returned to the living room and waited quietly. After half an hour, the door of the dormitory was open from the outside. Li Baiqian's laughter could be heard from outside the door. Make way, make way. Brother Tough, please step aside. This is a treasure. It's going to be our storefront in the future. It's very precious. Don't touch it. Li Tianlan suddenly became interested. He smiled and stood up. Before he could take a step, Li Baiqian had already walked over with a huge plaque nearly 3 meters long and more than 1 meter wide. His figure was a little too thin. Combined with the plaque on his shoulder, it looked extremely funny. The plaque blocked his view, but Li Baiqian's tone was extremely excited. He kept greeting, Where's Tianlan? Tianlan, come and see the gift I prepared for you. It's pretty good. Li Tianlan was less than half a meter away from him. He helped Li Baiqian put down the plaque on his shoulder and said with a smile, Scented rosewood? It's very rare, isn't it? It's okay. Li Baiqian chuckled and said in a wretched and proud manner, There are plenty of them on Mount Shu. Every hall has one hanging on it. This is the biggest one. Yesterday, I went back to Mount Shu with my martial nephew and stole this thing. Well, I took that one with me. There were words on it, but I removed them. How can I use it? Is this thing stylish enough? Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. Although Li Baiqian changed his words after saying half a sentence, he was not deaf. How could he not know that the origin of this plaque was unknown? Scented rosewood was extremely precious. According to the market price, such a large scented rosewood plaque would cost at least tens of thousands of yuan per kilogram. It could even be doubled in an auction. Even if its economic value was not mentioned, the symbolic meaning of this thing hanging on the hall of Mount Shu was probably far greater than its practical meaning. Moreover, Li Baiqian also said that this was the largest plaque on Mount Shu, so its value was even more unimaginable. Stole it. Li Tianlan coughed and asked in a low voice, Are you kidding me? I'm one of the 4 great sword masters of Mount Shu. Is there anything in Mount Shu that I can't take? And I can take it above board. How could I steal it? Li Baiqian said in a righteous tone, denying it in a righteous tone. Li Tianlan nodded with a hollow smile. He changed his approach and said with a smile, Then what were the original words on this plaque? Nirvana. Li Baiqian was excited. He was a noisy person, so when he was happy, he spoke without thinking. As soon as the 2 words came out, he suddenly realized that something was wrong and stopped talking. Nirvana. This time, not only Li Tianlan, but also Ning Qiansheng and Wang Yuetong looked incredulous. They looked at Li Baiqian as if they were looking at a monster. Baiqian, why don't you steal the whole Mount Shu? Wang Yuetong was silent for a while, and then chuckled softly with a playful smile. Li Tianlan was no longer a country bumpkin who had just come to Huuding. At least he had a clear understanding of the situation of the special warfare system and the major martial arts forces in Zhongzhou State. He only needed to hear Li Baiqian's words to know the origin of the plaque. Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master of Mount Shu, was one of the top 10 contemporary experts in Zhongzhou State. He ranked above Dong Xingwudi, the commander of the Border Control Corps, and was second only to the 4 Invincible Realm experts. The Nirvana sword master could be said to be the leader of Mount Shu in this generation, and also Li Baiqian's eldest senior brother. It was said that his sword intent had reached the peak and was expected to enter the Invincible Realm at the age of less than 40. Unlike Li Baiqian, who had seniority and fame, Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana sword master, was an absolute expert and a big shot in the whole Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan subconsciously glanced at the plaque. There was indeed an ancient-looking long sword carved on both sides of the plaque. In that case, the 4 words erased by Li Baiqian on the plaque were the Nirvana sword master. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. He only felt a little absurd and also a little touched. Li Beitian carried the plaque of the Nirvana Sword Master from thousands of miles away. It was almost equivalent to carrying the face of Mount Shu to this small dormitory. Well done. Li Tianlan gave a thumbs up and said with a wretched smile. Li Beitian froze for a moment and then burst out laughing. His smile was hearty and joyful. But didn't your eldest senior brother make trouble for you? I guess he already knows what happened yesterday, right? Li Tianlan asked curiously. I didn't steal it. Otherwise, eldest senior brother would have taken me back long ago. I took it, understand? Take this as a gift from Shushan. Can't we name our own organization? When the time comes, write the name of your institution on it and hang it in front of the gate. How prestigious it will be. Li Beitian chuckled and looked at the plaque on the side. The more he looked at it, the more satisfied he was. Seeing that Li Beitian seemed to be serious, Li Tianlan was also skeptical and did not ask any more questions. Wang Yuedong, who had seen the Nirvana Sword Master with soaring sword intent, would not easily believe Li Beitian's nonsense. She rolled her eyes and calmly pulled a girl who entered the door with them. She whispered, Huayu, is what your martial uncle said true? The girl had delicate features. She was not extremely beautiful, but she was calm and made people feel very comfortable. She was also this year's freshman in the Sky Academy and was the eldest disciple of Nirvana Sword Master Wei Kunlun. Her name was Yi Huayu. On the day before school started, she even had a meal with Li Tianlan and Ning Qianqing. During the meal, Yi Huayu could sense her youngest martial uncle's unusual enthusiasm for Li Tianlan. But she did not expect that just a few days after the incident, youngest martial uncle would steal the plaque hung in front of the main hall for his brother. Hearing Wang Yuedong's question, Yi Huayu resisted the desire to roll her eyes. She nodded and then shook her head, looking confused. Yesterday, when she returned to Mount Shu with youngest martial uncle, her master was very happy. However, at dinner, youngest martial uncle bragged to her that he met two good brothers, both of whom had the potential to be invincible and earth-shattering. He also said that many years later, the three of them would step into the invincible realm together, and from then on, they would be invincible in the dark world. Her master and the other two martial uncles were very generous to youngest martial uncle, so they were naturally happy to hear this. They had a hearty dinner, and youngest martial uncle took the opportunity to keep urging them to drink, saying how the three of them would carry forward Mount Shu after entering the invincible realm. During the meal, he poured 6 bottles of liquor into her master's mouth. The liquor looked ordinary, which was a Moutai with 53% alcohol, but contained drunk overlord with 70% alcohol. Youngest martial uncle did not drink much because of his craftiness. Almost all 6 bottles of liquor went in her master's stomach. Before they finished the meal, her master was already unconscious. As a result, youngest martial uncle took the plaque in front of the master's hall, carried it, and ran away. Although it had been a day, it was estimated that at this time, her master, who had drunk 5 or 6 bottles of liquor with 70% alcohol, was still asleep. How could she have time to catch him? Looking at Wang Yuetong's increasingly confused eyes, Yi Huayu nodded against her will and said, It's true. As soon as she said this, Yi Huayu felt as if her conscience had been eaten by a dog. She looked at Li Beitian with more and more resentful eyes. Li Beitian did not care. Looking at Li Tianlan, who was still in a daze, he said with a smile, I've prepared the pen and ink. Tianlan, don't waste time. Hurry up. Have you thought of a name? Write it right now. Yi Huayu's soft mouth twitched again. Among the people present, she was probably the only one who could see that youngest martial uncle was feeling guilty. As long as Li Tianlan wrote the words, even if her master knew, he could only hold it in. He could not really ask someone to erase the words and take the plaque back like youngest martial uncle. Could he? This kind of battle chi thing was not interesting at all. I've thought of a name, East Emperor Palace. Li Tianlan said softly, glancing at everyone's reaction. When he saw Yi Huayu, he paused, then nodded and said, What do you think? I have no opinion. Ning Qianqing said with a smile. This name is domineering and imposing. Li Beitian laughed and suddenly paused. He frowned and said, East Emperor? This name is a little familiar. A few days ago, someone seemed to tell me about an something emperor, Li Tianlan, who was originally happy, suddenly felt a pain in the ass. He thought Li Beitian had heard the rumors about Dongsheng Huang too, but as he talked to himself, Li Tianlan suddenly became speechless. He told Li Beitian the name Dongsheng Huang tu a few days ago. So that's it? Li Tianlan asked softly, glanced at Yi Huayu again, and then said, Beitian, your martial niece, her? Li Beitian seemed to be thinking about who told him about something emperor a few days ago. Hearing this, he said casually, of course she will join East Emperor Palace with me. She is the direct descendant of eldest senior brother, my good martial niece. What can I say? Yi Huayu blushed and nodded at Li Tianlan. Welcome. Li Tianlan smiled at Yi Huayu. In the entrance maneuver, Yi Huayu's score was in the top 50, and it seemed that her ranking was relatively high. He would never complain about such a talent. Yi Huayu nodded and looked at the thoughtful youngest uncle. She didn't know what he was thinking about all day, so she said helplessly, East Emperor Palace is a good name. Do you want to write it now? She raised a plastic bag in her hand, which contained the pen and ink that had been prepared. So soon? Li Tianlan was stunned. He was not afraid of writing. Since he was a child, he would practice calligraphy with his grandfather almost every day, rain or shine. After years of practice, although his calligraphy did not have the amazing style of a master, every stroke was extremely imposing, and it would definitely be pleasing to the eye. The sooner, the better. Yi Huayu said softly, taking the blame that originally belonged to Li Beitian on herself. Today is the first day of the establishment of East Emperor Palace. It will be more meaningful to write it earlier. Okay. Li Tianlan took a deep look at her, turned around, put the plaque down, and ordered casually, Yuetong, grind the ink. Wang Yuetong responded obediently and took the pen and ink from Yi Huayu's hand. Li Tianlan emptied his mind and stood in front of the huge plaque, looking calm. I got it. Li Beitian suddenly let out a loud shout. Wang Yuetong, who was grinding the ink, shook her little hand, and the ink flew out and fell on her white tights. Li Beitian said with a smile, no wonder it sounds so familiar. Tianlan, you mentioned that person to me a few days ago. What's his name again? Li Tianlan, who was also shocked, took a deep breath, and then another deep breath. Finally, he couldn't hold it and directly swore, get out, get out, get out. Qiansheng, take this guy out and beat him to death. Ning Qiansheng came over with a smile and pulled Li Beitian, who was confused, out. Yi Huayu and Yu Qingyan also went out. In the living room, Wang Yuetong frowned and looked at the ink on her pants. She shook her head and suddenly smiled. They are very interesting. Yes, very interesting. Li Tianlan said softly. Wang Yuetong dipped the pen in the ink and handed it to Li Tianlan. She chuckled and said, I want to appreciate your calligraphy. Li Tianlan took the pen and looked at the plaque in front of him. For a moment, he couldn't write. At this moment, he suddenly thought of the even more precious red sandalwood plaque in the camp at the border. The plaque with the words Leaf Family on it represented the hundreds of years of glory and desolation of the Leaf family. That plaque was now placed in the border camp, representing the end of the Leaf family. But the plaque in front of him, it represented a beginning with countless possibilities. Li Tianlan's mood was complicated. There was a fighting spirit, lofty sentiments, confusion and uneasiness, as well as unwillingness and resentment. Zhuan Yuantai of Kunlun was now the 10th generation. The Li family had lasted from the 5th generation to the present. The 9 invincible realm experts were all the gods of war of Zhongzhou state and the backbone of the country. They guarded the peace of a city and a country with a family. Some people were invincible. When they drew their swords, all the people in the world were nonentities. Some people laughed arrogantly and made thousands of enemies bow their heads while talking and laughing. Some people swore to fight to the death and cast the light of the god of war with their lives and souls. Some people solemnly swore to stand at the border and guard the border. In different circumstances and different times, some people turned the tide, some people died in battle, some people swallow mountains and rivers, and some people look down on the world. For 500 years, 9 generations of invincible realm experts. How could the majesty and pride that flashed in the past endless years disappear? How could it disappear? The majesty was gone, and the pride was lost. The border camp was getting smaller and smaller. The end of the Lee family seemed to be in sight. 20 years ago, thousands of elites followed his grandfather to the border. 20 years later, there were no more than 100 people on the border. Where were they? They were all in the tombs behind the camp. Nearly 1,000 tombs, nearly 1,000 tombstones. How many of the corpses buried under the ground would have a good death? Li Tianlan smiled softly, a little self-deprecating, but more of a bone-chilling coldness and mockery. It was not until this moment that he realized that those uncles that his grandfather asked him to remember, those uncles who held him when he was a child, those bones buried in the tombs, those memories that he thought were very clear, turned out to be blurred when he thought about them again. For so many years, it was really too long. It was so long that he almost forgot those veterans who died for the Li family. It was so long that the people outside had forgotten them. Li Tianlan gently raised the pen and fell on the plaque. In the living room, a pure sword intent without any impurities suddenly broke out in the faint fragrance. The sword intent was dense. It swept everything. Li Tianlan's pen was getting slower and slower, but the sword intent in the living room was getting stronger and stronger and gradually approaching perfection. His expression was calm. One of his eyes was flashing with knife light and sword shadow, but the other eye was deep and silent, without any ripples. Wang Yuedong stared at Li Tianlan closely, her eyes worried. This state was similar to meditation, but it wasn't meditation at all. For any martial artist, it was an opportunity, but at the same time, it was dangerous. Li Tianlan stopped, and the tip of the pen moved little by little on the plaque. The sword intent in the living room roared and rotated, and the pressure was heavy. Crack! Several glasses on the coffee table broke in an instant. Li Tianlan didn't feel it all. He just quietly moved his pen. Time passed very fast and very slowly. Wang Yuetong stared at Li Tianlan without blinking. The word east was completed. The dense sword intent was everywhere. The sword intent passed by. The sofa, tables, chairs, and floor in the living room had all been covered with sword marks of different depths. Wang Yuedong carefully protected herself. After hesitating for a while, finally, she stood up, walked slowly to the door, and then sat down at the door. She was here. No matter who, no one could disturb Li Tianlan. The sword intent in the living room was stronger. The first stroke of the word emperor was finished. There was a monstrous sharpness leaping out from a stroke. The whole living room was already in a mess. Li Tianlan, who was completely immersed in it, stared at the plaque. His mind fell into the years, passing by the hundreds of years of glory of Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun. The invincible realm that dominated the dark world generation after generation, the different sword, and the different martial arts. Li Tianlan's mind was stirred. Blood flowed from the corners of his mouth, but he was more determined to write. The sword intent in the living room turned into killing intent. He was like a crazy demon. Time flew by. The word emperor was finished. It was already dark outside the window. Blood dripped on the floor. Li Tianlan's expression became more and more determined. Every stroke seemed to be integrated into his soul. His pride, with indomitable sharpness and killing intent. When the last stroke of the word palace was finished, outside the window, the darkness of the night faded away. An extreme ray of light leaped into the sky. It shone brightly. The sun rose. Li Tianlan finally put down the pen. His eyes gradually returned to normal focus. Looking at the 3 words East Emperor Palace in front of him, he subconsciously narrowed his eyes. The 3 words East Emperor Palace were floating with the fragrance of ink. The killing intent and sword intent that almost pierced people's hearts were released from every stroke, showing off their sharpness. These were the most perfect 3 words he had ever written in his life. It was also the most perfect night in his life. The killing intent was overflowing. The state of mind was perfect. There was already a kind of style that all things in the world only needed a sword. Li Tianlan turned his head silently. Beside him, an identical shadow stood beside him, also looking at the plaque in front of him. It was vivid and lifelike. The shadow turned its head as Li Tianlan. The man and the shadow looked at each other and smiled at the same time. Li Tianlan wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth, feeling relaxed. Chapter 109. Li Tianlan carefully put down the plaque with the words, East Emperor Palace. When he looked back at the living room, he was suddenly shocked. The whole living room was already in a mess, much more exaggerated than being robbed. The floor, the walls, the ceiling, and all the places visible to the naked eye were all covered with ravines caused by the sword qi. The shallowest one was 4 to 5 centimeters deep. Large pieces of white ash fell from the walls. When the sword qi swept across, it fell everywhere. There was almost nothing intact in the living room. The leather sofa, which was originally of good quality, was cut everywhere, and the 2 wooden chairs had fallen apart. The water cup and kettle were completely smashed. The water inside flowed freely and condensed with the white ash in the place, turning into mud. The TV and the air conditioner all had dense cracks. Except for himself and the plaque in front of him, everything in the living room was broken into a mess as if it had experienced the end of the world. Li Tianlan touched his nose subconsciously. Such a scene, even he, the initiator, was a little awestruck. Last night was the night when the sword intent in his chest was at its peak. All kinds of emotions, such as resentment, hatred, killing intent, unwillingness, helplessness, and doubt, gathered together and finally turned into the purest sword intent to express, turning into the 3 words East Emperor Palace on the plaque. His mind was immersed in the past, immersed in martial arts. It was a pure world full of saber lights and sword shadows. That magical state made his heart clear and absent-minded. Although it was not meditation, it was several times better than meditation. Overnight, he went straight from the stabilization phase of the chi-controlling realm to the peak phase and achieved the primary level of the shadow formula. Such a harvest was already great, but Li Tianlan thought that the most wonderful state was that. Even if he woke up now and recalled the state last night, he still felt the aftertaste was endless. Vaguely, there seemed to be sword intent accumulating and condensing in his heart. But looking at the messy living room in front of him, Li Tianlan, who had completely returned to reality, could only smile bitterly. He didn't know how many credits he, Li Beitian, and Ning Qiansheng would be deducted for messing up the dormitory. He also didn't know whether he could make the old headmaster bend the rules because of his relationship with the headmaster. Li Tianlan stretched, lit a cigarette, and went to the bedroom to have a look. But no one was there. The sun rose outside the window, and the night faded. He was in a daze for a while, and for a moment, he had a feeling that he didn't know what year it was. Creak! The security door of the dormitory was gently pulled open by someone. Wang Yuetong walked in cautiously. Seeing Li Tianlan smoking in the living room, she instantly breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "Senior brother, have you finished writing?" As he spoke, Li Beitian and Ning Qiansheng stood outside the dormitory. Yu Qingyin and Yi Huayu walked into the dormitory one by one and came to the living room. F***CK, what's going on? Is it haunted? Or were you robbed? The first thing Li Beitian saw was the mess in the living room. He was stunned. Not only him, but the others who saw the scene in the living room were also stunned. Yesterday, Wang Yuetong had been guarding the door after she went out. Even when they came back, she would not let them in. At first, Li Beitian and Ning Qiansheng did not pay much attention to it. But as they waited longer and longer, they gradually felt that something was wrong. From yesterday afternoon to this morning, the few people standing at the door could only vaguely feel that there was a pure and awe-inspiring sword intent in the dormitory becoming more and more condensed. But who would have thought that, in less than a day, the whole living room was destroyed like this by Li Tianlan? Was he writing, or was he doing damage? There was a small accident. Li Tianlan looked a little unnatural. He took a puff of his cigarette and said, "I'll go to the headmaster later." The dormitory probably needs to be renovated. Don't make a sound. Li Beitian, who seemed to be in a strange state of mind, suddenly opened his mouth. He did not make a fuss, but said something in a low voice. Li Tianlan was stunned, but he saw that Li Beitian, who had been smiling most of the time, looked unusually serious and serious. His eyes kept moving around the living room, carefully observing every sword mark on the walls and ceiling. His eyes became brighter and brighter, and more fanatical and joyful. Ning Qiansheng was also thoughtful, ignoring the sofa and electrical appliances in the living room that could no longer be used, and only looking at the walls. At first glance, the four walls seemed to be in a mess because of the sword qi. They looked extremely ugly, but if one looked closely, the walls of the living room seemed to have a different charm under the sword marks. The sword marks went from shallow to deep, and the sword intent grew from nothing to something, from light to heavy. They were displayed in front of people one by one. They were messy and fragmented, but they had a violence and sharpness that was almost suffocating. In the eyes of warriors, such ugliness was actually beautiful, and it was the most powerful aesthetic. It seemed that every sword mark on the wall was worth looking at carefully. Li Baiyan's eyes flashed faster and faster. As the great void sword master of Mount Shu, he could feel the illusory great void sword intent. His talent could be imagined. Now the sword marks appeared in front of him, and the extremely pure sword intent kept surprising him. The bottleneck that had been bothering him for a long time began to loosen in the sword marks. Li Beitian actually felt that he was about to break through. Tianlan, have you finished writing? Li Beitian suddenly turned around and looked at Li Tianlan with solemn eyes. Li Tianlan nodded and pointed to the plaque on the side with its back facing the crowd. The three words, East Emperor Palace, on the plaque were too sharp. It was something that needed time to wash away. Looking at it now, it was still a little dazzling. Li Beitian walked over without saying a word and turned over the plaque. The three words, East Emperor Palace, appeared completely in front of Li Beitian. They were not flamboyant, but three upright words. Every stroke was majestic. The upright regular script gave people a feeling of arrogance and unruly like cursive. Li Beitian subconsciously narrowed his eyes and faced the sharpness, but his pupils were getting brighter and brighter. The sword intent, like a vast ocean, circled in every stroke. At first, the sword intent was light, and there was a kind of attitude that made all things surrender. The surging sword intent reached its peak from the word emperor. The sword intent of the last word was restrained, and the killing intent was monstrous, as if the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. The three big words, East Emperor Palace, seemed to have completely disappeared in front of Li Beitian. There was only sword and sword intent in his eyes. Every stroke of the three words, even the slightest turn, seemed to be explaining what the extreme of the sword was. Li Beitian breathed rapidly, and his eyes were wild with joy. He had been stuck at the threshold of the peak of the ice-condensing realm, or even the fulfillment for a long time. Now he finally found the opportunity to break through to the fire-flaming realm. Even if his senior brother really wanted to compete with him after he sobered up, he would not be willing to erase the three words when he saw them. Would he? The words were sharp and dazzling. Li Qianlan's eyes instinctively welled up with tears, but he was smiling quietly and contentedly. I have gained something. He looked at the plaque in front of him and said seriously and affirmatively, I have thought about something. Ning Qiansheng, who was also looking at the plaque, said slowly in a dignified and joyful tone. The two turned to look at Li Tianlan at the same time. The three words gave them too much inspiration. What about Li Tianlan, who wrote the three words himself? What would he gain? I have achieved something. Li Tianlan chuckled. He had achieved the basic level of the shadow formula, and his realm had taken a step forward. Li Qianlan's combat capability had improved again, and he even vaguely touched the fulfillment and even the limit of the chi-controlling realm. The goal that tribulation gave him was to break through the chi-controlling realm and enter the ice-condensing realm in 3 years. But now Li Tianlan was sure that he could break through in the most perfect state in 1 year at most. He turned his head and looked at the 3 words he had written. The 3 words had inadvertently brought his sword, his heart, and his Tao to another level. This was the most affirming gain. That's good. It's the best. Li Beitian laughed and looked at Li Tianlan seriously. Tianlan, put the plaque here first. Xinsheng and I have to study it carefully. Li Tianlan nodded indifferently and did not say much. Wang Yuedong took out a form from her bag and said, 3i came again later, but I didn't let her in. She asked me to give this form to you. Senior brother, please fill it out as soon as possible. Li Tianlan took it and looked at it. It was a form for the establishment of a new structure in the special warfare system, including the name of the organization, staffing, office location, required equipment, and so on. Li Tianlan frowned. He had no experience in this kind of thing. He thought for a while and said directly, Beitian and Qiansheng are the 2 deputy directors on the form. Yuetong, I'll be your secretary. Wang Yuetong said with a cheerful smile. Yes. If there's something, I'll do it. If there's nothing, I'll do it. Li Beitian, who was still staring at the plaque, replied casually. Wang Yuetong's face instantly turned red. Although she had prepared for this in private, it was still too shameful for this bastard to say it out. She glared at Li Beitian and said bitterly, Li Taishu, say it again. Li Beitian's body trembled. When he heard this annoying name, he felt weak in an instant. Ahem, I'm sorry. I said something wrong. He gave a hollow laugh and did not even dare to look back. Then it settled. Fill Yuetong's name in the secretary column. Li Tianlan nodded calmly. In fact, he felt that Li Beitian's words were simply a famous saying. When he thought of it, he felt secretly happy, didn't he? As for Qingyan, she still needs to be tempered. She will follow Qiansheng as an assistant first. Beitian, Huayu is your marshal niece. You can arrange it. He waved the documents in his hand, shook his head, and sighed. For the time being, we can handle the core personnel. We will take them in later. It seems that we still need to find a time to go out. The office staff, the office address, and so on. It doesn't seem to be a big matter, but there are a lot of things to do, so we have to arrange them well. My sister called me once last night. Wang Yuetong said in a clear voice, she asked you to call Senior Yu. After you fill out the form, you can leave this matter to Senior Yu. As for the office location, my sister has already chosen it for you. Senior Yu will also close Yu's private restaurant and go to take charge of the new institution. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and asked curiously, where is the office location? I don't know. Wang Yuetong shook her head honestly. It seems to be a club before. I didn't ask much. Li Tianlan nodded, hesitating whether he should go and have a look in person. Wang Yuetong seemed to know what he was thinking and continued. And, senior brother, even if you want to go out, you can't go out for the time being. The Sky Academy will officially start classes tomorrow, and the timetable has been issued. The first class is the actual combat lesson, which is the highlight. You can't miss it. Li Tianlan was stunned and seemed to be thinking. Chapter 110. When he woke up from the dreamy dream, it was already morning outside the window. The weather was gloomy, and it seemed to be raining. Li Tianlan held the white and tender body in his arms, a little lost in thought. Wang Yuedong didn't leave. Then, he entered the bedroom in a dignified manner. Overnight, a man and a woman, a bed and a quilt in the same room, did everything that could be done except what should have happened. If today's actual combat lesson didn't require a perfect physical state, what should and shouldn't have happened might have happened last night. Actual combat lesson. Li Tianlan, who was in a trance, finally woke up. The Sky Academy's organization was extremely simple, roughly divided into the teaching office, the political department, the tactical staff department, the drill department, the logistics department, and the library. Literally, it was not difficult to see the role of these departments, and the relatively simple environment of the Sky Academy could be roughly seen through these departments. This was the place to cultivate talents for the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. With a simple organization, there would be less intrigue, and some teachers would have more time to arrange the courses in the academy. Therefore, compared with the simple organization in the Sky Academy, the courses in the Academy were extremely complicated. The 13 courses almost covered all the skills needed in the special warfare system. Mechanical control, gun control, physical training, tactical study, lurking and camouflage, sniping, investigation, assassination, security, electronic intrusion, torture and meditation, intelligence collection and analysis, and actual combat lesson. Strictly speaking, none of the 13 courses was useless, and they were all extremely important. But the actual combat lesson was the most special of all the courses, because it was an actual combat lesson. In other subjects, even the cold and treacherous assassination lesson, it was mostly teaching and telling. Even if there was a fight, it was also a drill. On the other hand, the combat lesson was a naked fight to the death. It was a battle between students with all their might. Under normal circumstances, such a course should not be held too early. At least, the Sky Academy would try to hold an actual combat lesson after they had a general understanding of all the students, to verify the students' learning gains, and to point out each student's shortcomings, so as to make targeted improvements. Li Tianlan had heard from Wang Yuedong that the previous freshmen of the Sky Academy were basically like this. But the first official lesson of this session was actual combat. Such an arrangement meant that the Sky Academy had tightened the nerves of every student from the beginning, making the competitive atmosphere in the Academy unprecedentedly strong. Thinking of the other news that Wang Yuedong had told him last night when they were aroused, Li Tianlan was lost in thought. According to Wang Yuedong, the first class was the actual combat lesson, which was just the beginning. Later, other lists would soon appear in the Sky Academy, such as the Academy Combat Power List, the Credit List, and the Potential List. It was said that the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy were still working hard to promote the elimination system and the life and death arena. But this proposal was shelved in Kunlun City. But judging from all kinds of news, the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy seemed to have formed a tacit understanding. So the reform this time became so radical. Although the elimination system and the life and death arena were put on hold, the release of each list was bound to cause a new round of endless competition. Those who could come to the Special Warfare Academy were all outstanding people, who would be willing to submit to others. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. The actual combat lesson was based on the class, and the 50 people in Li Tianlan's class were almost the 50 strongest people in the whole academy. Li Tianlan had seen the information of many of them from Qinwei Bai. If he hadn't returned to the peak of the Qi-controlling realm yesterday, it would have been really difficult to deal with such an actual combat. Wang Yuedong, who was nestled in Li Tianlan's arms, moved. Her long eyelashes fluttered, and she opened her eyes in a daze. "You're awake?" Li Tianlan glanced at her and said with a natural smile, "Get ready to get up. It's time for class." Wang Yuedong, who was sharing a bed with a man for the first time, felt peaceful and happy, with a trace of almost instinctive shyness. She gently moved her body, removed Li Tianlan's hand on her hip, and whispered with a smile, "My hand is dead." Li Tianlan coughed, and his eyes were hot. If it weren't for the actual combat lesson today, he could have eaten this charming little vixen whole last night. Now, feeling her delicate body hiding in the quilt, Li Tianlan's heart was really regretful and expectant. The so-called capricious mind was just like this. "I gave you a chance before, but you didn't want it. Now it's useless to regret it." Wang Yuetong giggled, pursed her rosy lips, and pointed to the wardrobe beside the bed. "Senior brother, help me get underwear. Whichever color you like." Li Tianlan said yes, and didn't deliberately choose. He opened a small box in the wardrobe for underwear, took a set of black underwear, and went to bed. He smiled and said, "Do you want me to help you put it on?" Wang Yuetong's little face was red, and she rolled her eyes at him. She whispered, "Didn't you bully me enough last night? You're so annoying." She reached out and pinched Li Tianlan. Her eyes were bitter, and it seemed that she was really wronged. Li Tianlan looked embarrassed. Thinking about what he did last night, it seemed that he really went too far. In a way, the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai was indeed bullied by him last night. Wang Yuedong bit her lip and pinched Li Tianlan again. Suddenly, she giggled and said, "Do you like women kneeling in front of you so much? Brother-in-law, did my sister spoil you too much?" Li Tianlan could handle this kind of private conversation between young couples, but the thought of talking about Qin Weibai while lying in bed with Wang Yuedong made him uncomfortable all over. He got up from the bed and quickly changed into the camouflage uniform. Stiffly, he changed the topic. "I'll go out and have a look. It's almost time. Get dressed and come out quickly." Wang Yuedong sat on the bed and giggled. She looked at Li Tianlan's back with infatuation in her eyes. She didn't expect this man to be so domineering in bed. He was simply a tyrant who did whatever he wanted. Although she felt wronged because of being bullied by him last night, Wang Yuedong didn't feel uncomfortable when she thought about it. She thought silently, and her face became redder and redder. For a while, she sat on the bed and didn't move for a long time. In the living room, Li Beitian and Ning Qiansheng had already gotten up. They stood in front of the plaque again, carefully studying the sword intent contained in the words East Emperor Palace. Sounds came from the kitchen from time to time. Yu Qingyin and Yi Huayu were busy in the kitchen. On the first day of the establishment of the East Emperor Palace, the 6 core people stayed here last night. There were 3 bedrooms. Li Tianlan and Wang Yuedong had one. Yu Qingyin and Yi Huayu had another, and Li Beitian and Ning Qiansheng had another. It was just right. "Morning." Li Tianlan took out a cigarette, put it in his mouth, and said casually. Li Beitian waved his hand slightly. The sword intent rose and fell in the living room, and a bit of heat suddenly appeared. The cigarette in front of Li Tianlan had been lit, and the smoke drifted away. Li Beitian looked calm and said inscrutably, "Morning." Even Ning Qiansheng, who was known as Posturing Chung, would have to admit defeat. Li Tianlan didn't mind. He just smiled with a little surprise and said, "Are you in the fire-flaming realm?" "Of course. You're just in the fire-flaming realm. You can enter it easily. Give me a little more time, and I'll enter the thunder-shocking realm or even the invincible realm." Li Beitian looked generous and unafraid. "You're so pretentious. You're such a genius, but you're still slower than me." Ning Qiansheng looked disdainful. "You're talking about entering the thunder-shocking realm or the invincible realm. If it weren't for the words Tianlan, I don't know how long you'll be stuck in the fire-flaming realm, right?" Li Tianlan waved his hand and interrupted their bickering. He said with a smile, "Anyway, it's a good thing to break through before the actual combat lesson starts. Try to get a good ranking today. The first place of the actual combat lesson would be rewarded with 15 credits. The second to fifth would be rewarded with 10 credits. And the top 10 would be rewarded with 3 credits. Li Tianlan had to fight for these credits. Well, I hope Beitian and I can meet some tough opponents and create some trouble for them first. Tianlan, you just try your best to get points. It's good enough that we can graduate. Whether the East Emperor Palace can really become the East Emperor Palace or not, your credits are the most important." Ning Qiansheng nodded and said. Li Beitian smiled and winked at the bedroom. "I'm afraid that Tianlan fought too much last night, and I don't know if he still has the strength to face the opponents today. Every minute of the night is worth 1,000 pounds of gold. It's okay. Even if you fail today, it doesn't matter. We all understand." "Understand your ass." Li Tianlan scolded with a smile and rubbed Li Beitian's hair. "It's time to eat." Yu Qingyin's sweet voice sounded in the kitchen, and the dining room was already filled with the fragrance of food. Li Tianlan looked at Ning Qiansheng and had an idea. He suddenly whispered, "Qiansheng, think of a way to get Qinyin. She's a treasure. When we live together, we'll eat and drink well every day." "Tut tut. Go away, go away. Fuck you. She's my future wife, not a nanny." The actual combat lesson started at 7:30 in the morning and ended at 7 o'clock in the evening. It lasted for nearly 12 hours. Li Tianlan and the others did not waste any time. They rushed to the number 1 training ground as soon as they finished eating. The training ground did not cover a large area. It was a flat land covering an area of about 50 acres. There were about 20 high platforms on it, clean and tidy, looking very solemn. This was not only the location of the actual combat lesson, but also the place where the elites of the two academies competed with each other if the main venue of the maneuver of the two academies was the Sky Academy. Therefore, there was also a rostrum not far from the training ground. When Li Tianlan and the others arrived, there was already a solemn and silent square formation in front of the number 1 training ground. A middle-aged man with a dark face stood motionless in front of the square formation. "I'm not late." Ning Qianxing looked at his watch and said. Li Tianlan nodded and walked over quickly. He stood up straight and said, "Report." The man with the dark face in front of the square formation glanced at him coldly and then looked down at his watch. He did not say much, but said coldly, "Get in line." Li Tianlan responded. The 6 of them stood neatly in the last row. "All right." The man with the dark face glanced at the square formation in front of him and said coldly, "Everyone is here. Let me introduce myself." Li Beitian forced himself to lower his voice and said incoherently. He opened the number in his hand and saw a number written neatly on it. Next to him, the number in Ning Qianxing's hand was 5. The first battle of the first actual combat lesson of the Sky Academy. Ning Qianxing met Li Beitian. Chapter 111. Other than fate, the only explanation for such a painful outcome was coincidence. Ning Qianxing met Li Beitian. Li Tianlan did not believe that there was any shady business involved. The 50 people drew lots at the same time, and each number was different. Unless Yang Mengjiang was an immortal, it was impossible for him to know the numbers that Li Beitian and Ning Qianxing had drawn. Yang Mengjiang could not help but be convinced by his casual call. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Li Tianlan was silent for 2 seconds and said softly, "After all, it's an actual combat lesson. It's a good opportunity. Let's take it as a way to get to know each other better." From the point of view of snatching credits, this was undoubtedly the worst result. Ning Qianxing and Li Beitian had both broken through to the fire-flaming realm. They were definitely Li Tianlan's 2 greatest helpers. If the 2 of them kept winning, they would undoubtedly help Li Tianlan get the first place. But now, Li Beitian and Ning Qianxing met each other in the first round. It was destined that only one of them could survive. For the East Emperor Palace, this was definitely a loss. After all, this was not a regular maneuver. There was no such thing as a winner's group or a loser's group. They had to make a ranking according to their strength. This was an actual combat class. A win was a win, a loss was a loss. There were 50 people in the first round, and there were 25 actual combat matches. No matter if Ning Qianxing or Li Beitian lost, their ranking would fall below the 25th place. Both of them were definitely among the top of the 50 people, and the ranking after the 25th place was definitely not a reflection of their true strength. However, that was the rule. If they were unlucky in an ordinary actual combat lesson, no one could complain. But from the perspective of actual combat, it was not a bad thing for the 2 to meet. As Li Tianlan said, they could get to know each other better. In the ranking of the top 10 experts of the young generation, Li Beitian ranked 4th and Ning Qianxing ranked 5th. Both of them had recently broken through to the fire-flaming realm at the same time. Although they were friends, it did not mean that they did not want to spar with each other. Although today was not a good opportunity, since it had appeared, it would not be good to miss it. "Go." Li Tianlan glanced at them and said with a smile, "Don't overdo it. We're on the same side. Don't get angry." Number 3. Number 5. In front of the crowd, Yang Mengjiang's voice had already risen quite a bit. "What are you waiting for? Come up." Ning Qianxing glanced at Li Beitian. The 2 of them stepped out of the line and walked up to platform number 2. The others were stunned for a moment, and then there was an uproar. Some were excited, some were gloating, and some were looking forward to it. No one expected that the 2 numbers Yang Mengjiang randomly called out were Li Beitian and Ning Qianxing. Li Beitian was high profile. He had the name Li Taishu not to hide his identity, but because he really felt that the name was not worthy of his wisdom and martial prowess. In the past few days, Li Beitian had been wandering around. It was said that he had experienced the tenderness of no less than 10 female classmates. Now that he was the great void sword master of Mount Shu, There were very few female students who did not spread their legs. In the past few days, he had been visiting the female dormitories alone. In this way, he lived a comfortable life, but his identity had long been spread throughout the Sky Academy, and almost everyone knew him. On the other hand, Ning Qiansheng was on the list of the top 10 experts of the younger generation and was even more famous. During the entrance maneuver, their relationship of mutual support was also known to everyone. Now that the two of them had met, it was simply lively from every angle. Even young Mingjiang did not expect that the two numbers he randomly called out would call out to them. He was obviously stunned and could not help but look in Li Tianlan's direction. Li Tianlan was also looking at him, his expression calm and indifferent. Yang Mengjiang's expression did not change. He turned around and said directly, "Come up. Just let them fight each other. Teacher Yang's nickname is really beautiful. Yulan, who do you think is stronger?" In the crowd, Su Yunzong, who was extremely eye-catching in both height and body shape, tilted his neck and looked at Li Beitian and Ning Qiansheng on the platform. He laughed grimly in a low voice. "Don't talk nonsense." Gu Yulan glanced at Su Yunzong. She once again put on a delicate mask that covered her expression. Although her eyes were stern, her voice sounded unusually coquettish and tender, which made people's bones go soft. If it were before, Li Beitian would definitely be stronger. But now that Ning Qiansheng has probably succeeded in breaking through, it's hard to say who is stronger. She paused and said calmly, "Dongyu, what do you think?" Lu Dongyu stood beside them silently and shook her head. Among the former three giants of the Flames of War, Lu Dongxiao died in the hands of Li Tianlan, and Tan Shilai died in the hands of Ning Qiansheng. Now the Flames of War was in pieces, and Lu Dongyu had long lost her former glory. She followed Gu Yulan and Su Yunzong like an inconspicuous follower. Hearing Gu Yulan's question, Lu Dongyu shook her head silently and resisted the desire to look back. She said calmly, "It's better if they both die when they fight." Gu Yulan was silent, looking at Ning Qiansheng and Li Beitian, who had already walked onto the platform. She squinted her bright eyes and said calmly, "Watch this battle carefully. I've received news that Li Tianlan has also joined Huading's Special Operations Bureau, but not the headquarters, but the Thunder. I have an intuition that he will be our strongest opponent in the future. Now the opportunity to understand our opponent is right in front of us. We can't miss it. How unlucky are these two to meet each other? I guess they're already crying in their hearts." On the other side of the square formation, a short and fat man squinted his small eyes and chuckled. The meaning in his smile was hard to understand. His laugh was obscene and extremely inconspicuous. However, with him at the center, except for a few of his trusted followers, the others around him seemed to intentionally or unintentionally stay away from him. No one dared to approach him. He was Fan Haoyu, the leader of the elite organization. He was one of the older students. After the fall of the Flames of War, among the senior students who stayed in school, the elite organization could be said to be the most powerful one. Recently, several backbones of the Flames of War were introduced to the elite organization, which further increased its power. Different from Lu Dongxiao and Lu Dongyu in the last session, Fan Haoyu looked extremely terrifying when they joined forces. Fan Haoyu looked fat and short, but his strength at the peak of the fire-flaming realm, which was close to the fulfillment, was outstanding among all the students and even crushed many teachers. Among the 50 people present, basically all of them had suffered losses from the elite organization in the entrance maneuver. They had more or less seen Fan Haoyu's strength, so naturally, no one was willing to provoke him. "Don't jinx it. That voice is a bit weird. Don't call us together. If that happens, we won't be able to cry even if we want to." Beside Fan Haoyu, a handsome young man who looked the complete opposite to him said helplessly. He was Su Mai, the second in command of the elite organization. He was Fan Haoyu's best friend since childhood, so he had no scruples when speaking. "You're the one with a F** King Crow's beak, aren't you? I'll torture you to death." Fan Haoyu looked at Su Mai and suddenly smiled. "In this battle, who do you want to meet the most? Who do you want to meet the most?" Su Mai was stunned and suddenly fell silent. "Gu Yulan, After a full half a minute, he spoke softly. There was no anger in his voice, but his fighting spirit was extremely strong. In the entrance maneuver, the elite organization was responsible for the hunting mission in the woods. At that time, he was successfully attacked by Gu Yulan, who seemed to have no combat power. At that time, they all thought that Gu Yulan was in the ice-condensing realm, but now all kinds of information showed that Gu Yulan was a genius who had just entered the fire-flaming realm. But at that time, she used the means of the ice-condensing realm to attack him, which was a great shame. Now, Sumai wanted to meet Gu Yulan most to avenge his shame. Fan Haoyu frowned and hesitated. In fact, he wanted to persuade Sumai now. Although he was humiliated by Gu Yulan once, her strength was there. If they fought head-on, Sumai might not be a match for Gu Yulan, since their realms were similar. But it was not easy to say such words, even if they were brothers. Who do you want to meet the most? Sumai took a deep breath and suddenly asked, I want to learn from the little princess's sweetheart. Recently, there have been more and more rumors about the little princess in Yuzhou. Many people know that our little princess has already fallen in love with a freshman of the Sky Academy. Hey, some childs can't wait to tear him apart. Since I'm in a favorable position, I'd like to see this brother's ability in advance. If he can go against the natural order, it's not bad for me to be his follower. If he can't, I can do him a favor in advance, so that I won't know how I die. Fan Haoyu laughed, and subconsciously looked back in Li Tianlan's direction. In his sight, Li Tianlan almost immediately turned back to look at him. The two were stunned at the same time, but at least they were familiar with each other. After smiling and nodding, they did not say anything. If we meet the little princess, Sumai hesitated for a moment and suddenly said. Fan Haoyu's face froze, and he said bitterly, Sumai, don't jinx it. Be careful, or I'll strangle you. Sumai was unmoved and continued. If we meet the little princess, what should we do if she asks us to admit defeat? There were countless experts in the Sky Academy, but Wang Yuedong was obviously the last one they wanted to meet. It had nothing to do with strength. They could not fight at all. What else do you want to do? Fan Haoyu gritted his teeth and said, What else can we do except admit defeat? The sound of metal clashing rang out, crisp and sweet. In front of Fan Haoyu, an elegant woman with long hair silently took out two exquisite double knives and was gently wiping them. The woman had a plump figure. Her buttocks and legs wrapped in camouflage pants were round and slender, with soft curves and extremely attractive. This was a woman who could be described as amorous just by looking at her back, soft and charming. Her white and tender hand gently held the hilt of the knife. The blade was bright, but the curve at the bend was not smooth. Instead, it was full of sharp edges and corners, looking sharp and hard like joints. Short knife and beauty, sharp and charming, natural and complemented each other. Fan Haoyu's eyes lit up slightly. Looking at this woman, who was quite legendary and tragic among the senior students of the last year, he suddenly missed her charming and affectionate body. Hey, Duhanin. Fan Haoyu took a step forward and said with a smile, How about coming to my dormitory tonight? As long as you're obedient, I'll cover your food and drink for a month. Several freshmen nearby subconsciously turned their heads to look at the woman holding the double knives with fiery eyes. Does such a beautiful senior sister do that kind of business? Although it's a little expensive to cover a month's food and drink, it's worth it. Du Hanin silently wiped the knife in her hand and turned a blind eye to the strange eyes around her. She just shook her head gently and said softly, I'm not going. On the high platform, the sword intent suddenly rose. Illusory, the sword energy burned the prairie. Everyone raised their heads at the same time and looked at the battlefield. The frost-like chill spread rapidly. Neither Li Beitian nor Ning Qiansheng said a word and directly made their moves. Countless small and delicate ice swords lined up around Ning Qiansheng like a sword formation, rising and falling with amazing momentum. The high platform was about 20 meters in circumference. Wherever the sword formation pointed, Li Beitian seemed to be walking in the void. The illusory sword intent surrounded him, making his whole body blurry. His body was still in everyone's sight, but every step he took gave people a feeling that he was flickering. It was impossible to lock on or even attack him. He kept moving forward. The distance between the two was getting closer and closer. The sword formation around Ning Qiansheng was getting more and more magnificent, and the sword intent was dense. The two were 10 meters apart. Ning Qiansheng took a step forward. The entire sword formation rumbled in an instant. Countless ice swords rushed toward Li Beitian without reservation. Li Beitian slowed down a little, but he did not stop. Around him, the illusory sword intent became more and more ethereal. A large amount of sword rain approached him, but suddenly disappeared, leaving only the cold sword intent that kept spreading, which made most people frightened. Li Beitian still moved forward. Ning Qiansheng's sword rain was constantly cut up by the invisible great void sword intent in front of him, as if being swallowed by the void. His pace became slower and slower, but his momentum kept rising. 3 meters. Li Beitian raised one hand. In an instant, a bright sword light formed in his hand. It was sharp, fleeting, and distant. The great void sword intent enveloped the whole place. Everyone present almost instinctively straightened their bodies and became alert. The corner of Li Beitian's mouth twitched. "You go down, I'll go up." Ning Qiansheng looked deeply at him, nodded, and jumped off the high platform. "I admit defeat." The whole place was silent. The students who were waiting for the fight between the two were all dumbfounded. What happened just now? How could the winner be decided so quickly? Everyone looked at Li Beitian and then at Ning Qiansheng. This was a F****king fixed match. He was a F****king actor. Chapter 112. Although all the people present were geniuses, not many could understand the battle at once. The sword intent fell as soon as it rose. How could this be called wanting more? The drama ended as soon as it began. It was like watching an East Island love action movie, which was called a blockbuster. The gentle and charming heroine had just appeared, but it was over before she could make her pose. Everyone felt suffocated and had nowhere to vent their anger, which made them feel very aggrieved. Ning Qiansheng did not care. After jumping off the platform, he just looked at Yang Mengjiang and waited for his decision. 1 credit is deducted. Yang Mengjiang said expressionlessly. Then he waved his hand and said, "Get in line." Li Tianlan subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Li Beitian, who had not come down from the platform, Fan Haoyu in the crowd, Du Hanin, who was holding 2 sabers, and Gu Yulan, who had remained calm, all changed their expressions slightly. But no one said anything. The battle between Li Beitian and Ning Qiansheng could be seen clearly by those who had a good eye. Although the process was not intense, the outcome was not exaggerated. The two did not fight based on their combat strength, but on their sword intent. The Great Void Sword intent was illusory, while the Prairie Fire Sword intent was awe-inspiring and complete. In such a battle, although neither of them used their strongest means, many substantial things were exposed. Moreover, they did not hurt each other's feelings. This was a real fight. They were calm, but each had their own style. This battle was short, and the process was slow, but the quality of the battle was self-evident. How could Yang Mengjiang, as the leader of the actual combat lessons teaching group, not understand it? But he still deducted 1 credit from Ning Qiansheng. This kind of targeting attitude was a little obvious. Li Tianlan smiled and took a deep look at Yang Mengjiang. This core figure of Kunlun City, he didn't seem to be as straightforward as his appearance. Deep down, his stance was quite firm. Ning Qiansheng and Li Beitian stepped down one after another and got in line again. This point is unjustly lost. Yang Mengjiang is not a good person. Li Beitian took a deep breath. He opened his mouth and said with an ugly expression, "It's okay. Didn't I add the point I lost to you? There's nothing unjust about it." Li Tianlan didn't say anything. He just looked at Yang Mengjiang in silence. Yang Mengjiang's eyes seemed to be looking at him as well. His eyes were gloomy and indifferent, but Li Tianlan could always see a trace of sinister and deliberate provocation in his eyes. Li Tianlan smiled, and his eyes grew gentler. Yang Mengjiang's gaze had already shifted to the side as he continued. Number 6, number 17, come on stage. Li Tianlan and Ning Qinqing, however, in the next 3 years, there would be 2 actual combat classes every month. He had plenty of time to torture these freshmen. As the core figure of Kunlun City, there was no pure right or wrong in Yang Mengjiang's heart. Since this matter was personally ordered by Director Gu, he did the right thing if he did it well. Beside Li Tianlan, Wang Yuetong let out a soft cry of surprise. She waved the note in her hand and said with a smile, I'm number 17. Who's number 6? In the crowd, the crisp sound of metal clashing rang out. A figure holding a pair of sabers passed through the crowd and silently walked up the high platform. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. This person, Ning Qinqing, also frowned slightly. This woman is not weak, and I feel that her state is a little strange. Yuedong, be careful later. The corner of Li Baitian's mouth twitched, and he looked depressed. In the entrance maneuver, Li Baitian was seriously injured by a sneak attack not long after he got out of the maze and entered the woods. At that time, several senior students were led by Du Hanin. This person's realm was not high, but she was extremely fast and flexible. Every move of hers was an assassin's method that broke out instantly and then retreated unscathed. Moreover, she had rich combat experience and knew when to advance and when to retreat. Although it was just a sneak attack in the entrance maneuver, Li Tianlan was deeply impressed by this woman who had seriously injured him. This was supposed to be a feud, but it was stopped by the enchantress. The enchantress said that Du Hanin was her student. Li Tianlan didn't know how much of the enchantress's teachings she had learned. The enchantress's student should not be in danger when fighting against Wang Yuetong, right? I know, Wang Yuetong responded crisply. She looked at Li Tianlan and said softly, I'm going up. Li Tianlan nodded and looked at Du Hanin, who was already standing on a high platform, without saying anything. He had read the information about the Sky Academy that Qin Weibai had collected for him. According to Li Baitian, Du Hanin's strength was definitely not weak, but this name did not appear on the list that Qin Weibai had compiled. If she was a freshman, Li Tianlan would regard her as a fish that had slipped through the net. But she was clearly a senior student, which was a little strange. Wang Yuedong had already walked through the crowd and onto the high platform. Du Hanin's eyes were soft. She pursed her lips and smiled, saying softly, Greetings, little princess. Her appearance was undoubtedly extremely beautiful. It was not an aggressive kind of beauty, but a very gentle and comfortable feeling. However, as she smiled, her entire body seemed to have a touch of worldly charm. She was charming and affectionate, and would not make people feel disgusted. Instead, she had a kind of grace and dignity that made people's hearts tremble. Are you a student of Sixth Sister? Wang Yuedong tilted her little head and said with a smile, then just admit defeat. I won't embarrass you. I won't care about the little misunderstanding in the entrance maneuver. How about that? The two stood opposite each other. Although they were both wearing camouflage uniforms, they looked like a beautiful landscape painting. One was mature and charming, while the other was young and enchanting. It was supposed to be an actual combat lesson, but at this moment, it looked very pleasing to the eye. Sorry. Du Hanin's voice was still soft, but she said very firmly, I want to win. Cut the crap. Is this a place for you to waste time? Do it. Don't let me drag you down. Below the high platform, Yang Mengjiang's rough voice rang out in a high-pitched tone. If you don't do it, each of you will be deducted 1 credit. In every class of the Sky Academy, the teacher had the power to deduct 5 credits and reward 3 credits. But this power was limited to 1 time. It was also to better restrain and motivate the students in the class. Therefore, in the class, deducting credits and rewarding credits could be said to be the most exciting things. Excuse me. Du Hanin bent down slightly. When she straightened up, she also raised her hand. A sharp and delicate dagger with curved edges like a bone shot directly at Wang Yuedong. A fine, almost undetectable silk thread was connected to her wrist. When the dagger was shot out, the silk thread was straightened. Du Hannin's whole body seemed to be driven by the dagger and rushed directly to Wang Yuetong. The second dagger was thrown into the air as she sprinted. It rose in a straight line and fell to the ground with a whistling sound. The strong qi whistled in the air. The dagger broke through the air, and the whole blade was covered with a layer of ice. The dagger light shone brightly in the ice. Du Hannin's long hair fluttered with determination and sharpness, decisive and ruthless. An ice wall had been set up in front of Wang Yuetong. The surging sword intent condensed behind the ice wall like waves. The dagger stabbed into the ice wall with ice. Du Hannin, who followed closely behind, held the hilt of the dagger at the same time. Spin! On the bright blade, the saber gang suddenly rose. A 1-meter-long saber gang twisted and extended. As Du Hannin turned around, the sharp light streaked across the ice wall. Boom! The ice wall suddenly shattered. Ice chips flew all over the sky and instantly condensed into swords. The surging sword intent was dense, whistling, and about to envelop Du Hannin's whole body. The rain of swords rained down. Du Hannin held the dagger in one hand and shook the other slightly. The second dagger that was about to fall to the ground shook slightly, and then her whole body had returned to where the dagger was. The whistling rain of swords fell on the high platform. Under the impact of the sword qi, the hard ground was instantly filled with countless holes. Du Hannin, who had already appeared in the same place, dodged the rain of swords and rushed to Wang Yuetong again. Natural wind vein? Under the platform, Li Beitian looked at Du Hannin's figure seriously and said with some uncertainty. Li Tianlan also seemed to be a little hesitant. Watching the battle with rapt attention, he shook his head hesitantly and said, "It doesn't look like it." He had the wind and thunder veins, so he was most sensitive to strength and speed. People born with the wind vein had amazing speed. Experts who had been trained might be able to achieve the same effect in speed as those with the wind vein, but they would never be able to lift heavy things as easily as floating clouds and flowing water. Therefore, people with the wind vein were born assassins. Du Hannin was extremely fast and skillful with the two daggers, but Li Tianlan always felt that her movements were a little stiff. She seemed to be born with the wind vein, but he always felt that something was missing. On the high platform, Wang Yuetong missed the first strike, so she raised her sword again. The whistling sword energy scattered on the high platform gathered again. On the high platform, a 5-meter-long heavy sword stood in the air. Wang Yuetong waved her hand slightly. The huge sword shook hard in the air and fell instantly. It was a unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai. The sword was balanced. Everything was balanced and everywhere. Countless sword intents spread in an instant and enveloped the whole high platform. Du Hannin, who was sprinting, suddenly had a trace of frost all over her body. Wang Yuetong moved her body. In her small white hand, a delicate and slender ice sword appeared. In the surging sword intent, Wang Yuetong's body instantly turned into a flowing light and rushed straight to Du Hannin. It was also the unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai. Sword listens to the wind. At this moment, Wang Yuetong's long hair was dancing, stunning and proud. She was as graceful as snow, and her sword intent was like a rainbow. Raindrops fell from the air. Wang Yuetong went all out and used another unique skill. Sword listens to the rain. The sword rain fell, sharp and dazzling. The sharpness shone in all directions. The distance of more than 10 meters was closed in an instant. Du Hannin, who was holding two sabers, stretched her body and faced the rain, the sword in the sky, and Wang Yuetong without flinching. She took a step forward. The moment Wang Yuetong's long sword arrived, she held the sabers with both hands and suddenly spun. Like a sword dance, like a flower blooming, cold and elegant. In the air, countless pieces of ice flew around her in all directions. She spun faster and faster, and the ice became sharper and sharper. The sword rain in the sky shattered in the ice light, and the ice sword in Wang Yuetong's hand disappeared inch by inch. Du Hannin was still spinning. The giant sword fell from the sky. Du Hannin, who was spinning, suddenly pushed Wang Yuetong's chest and threw out a dagger. Wang Yuedong's body was directly pushed out by her, and Du Hanin rushed to the other side with the dagger. The giant sword fell. It was a loud bang. The powerful impact shook the whole high platform. With the place where the two of them fought as the center, a visible airwave appeared on the whole platform. Both Du Hanin and Wang Yuedong were hit by the airwave and fell off the platform at the same time. There was a moment of silence on the scene. The next second, thunderous applause suddenly broke out. Good. Everyone cheered loudly. Although this battle was also short, the process was much more exciting than the battle between Ning Qiansheng and Li Beitian. The cold and elegant Du Hanin, the proud and majestic Wang Yuetong, the agile figure, and the unparalleled unique skills were the real meaning of the actual combat lesson. Yang Mengjiang looked at the two of them coldly. After a moment of silence, he said coldly, "As a senior student, you actually tied with a freshman. What a shame. Deduct 1 credit." The corner of Du Hanin's mouth moved. She wanted to say that she could fight again, but in the actual combat lesson, falling off the platform was equal to failure. Such a rule was not something she could break. So she just nodded silently in the end and said nothing. Your body is stiff and your reaction is not fast enough. Even if you can't dodge the sword just now, you shouldn't have fallen off the platform. She has already made a move in advance. If you had been prepared, you would have won the battle. Yang Mengjiang took a deep breath and continued. In every battle, it was his responsibility as a teacher to point out the student's own shortcomings. Du Hanin continued to nod. Seeing that Yang Mengjiang had turned to face Wang Yuedong, she gave a self-deprecating smile and walked back to the line. Vaguely, she was still calm, but she gave people a feeling of helplessness and loneliness. Yuedong is good. You just lack actual combat experience in this battle. You need to train more in the future. Yang Mengjiang looked at Wang Yuedong, and his tone seemed to soften. Wang Yuedong nodded and also returned to the line. Before Li Tianlan could speak, Yang Mengjiang said again, "Number 10. Number 50. Get on the platform." Battles broke out and ended on the platform one after another. Compared to the previous 2 matches, the following matches were much more bloody. Someone even had an arm broken in the battle, and in the end, he staggered off the high platform. Yang Mengjiang was expressionless all the way. Watching another battle that could be said to be a lose-lose, he continued to call, "Number 15, number 26. Li Tianlan was slightly stunned. Looking at the number in his hand, he smiled and directly stepped out of the line. Yang Mengjiang's eyes turned cold, but he remained calm. A moment later, a young man standing next to Gu Yulan also stepped onto the platform. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and glanced at Gu Yulan, his eyes cold. "Do it. Hurry up." Yang Mengjiang's roar continued. "Go to hell." Opposite Li Tianlan, the young man's figure rushed over in an instant. Without saying a word, he attacked with all his strength. He was an expert in the stabilization phase of the ice-condensing realm of the former flames of war. With such strength, he did not expect to defeat Li Tianlan, who possessed the wind and thunder veins. But just now, Gu Yulan had told him that he should attack with all his strength, forcibly consume Li Tianlan's physical strength, and not let him rank too high. Attack with all his strength. He carried out the order very seriously. As he took the first step, all his strength had been completely concentrated in one blow. A war of attrition. A head-on confrontation. Li Tianlan's expression did not change. Looking at his opponent, who was madly roaring and rushing toward him, he suddenly raised his hand when the opponent rushed directly to him. In front of him, the air suddenly twisted and the sound whistled high. A punch against a punch. In a cracking sound of bones, the young man, who had attacked with all his strength, was directly blown away more than 20 meters by the punch. He fell awkwardly under the platform, motionless. Li Tianlan glanced at Gu Yulan, who narrowed her eyes and smiled, but his eyes were full of viciousness. There was no applause or cheering under the platform, but only silence. Killing an expert in the stabilization phase of the ice-condensing realm with one punch. The ice-condensing realm was the realm that most of the freshmen had reached. Since Li Tianlan could kill his opponent with one punch, didn't it mean that he could also kill most of them with one punch? Suddenly, countless fearful eyes under the platform looked at Li Tianlan. Looking calm, Li Tianlan slowly walked down the platform step by step. He came to Yang Mingjiang and said calmly, "Teacher, please give me some advice." Yang Mingjiang slightly narrowed his eyes and did not speak for a moment. Li Tianlan waited in silence, neither arrogant nor rash. Yang Mingjiang suddenly smiled and whispered, "Do you think I can't beat you?" Li Tianlan slightly raised his eyebrows and said lightly, "I don't know what you're talking about, teacher." "You don't need to know." Yang Mingjiang sneered. "You just need to remember one thing. In the next 3 years, you won't have an easy time in my actual combat lesson." Without warning, Yang Mingjiang suddenly raised his leg and kicked Li Tianlan hard in the chest. Even if it was not a full blow from a thunder-shocking realm expert, it instantly made Li Tianlan's body fly backward, and blood gushed out of his mouth. "You're cruel and merciless, and you don't care about your classmates. 5 credits will be deducted." Chapter 113. The 5th round of the actual combat lesson. When the winner stepped on the loser's chest and made the loser vomit blood, Yang Mingjiang did not say that the opponent was cruel and merciless. The 7th round of the actual combat lesson. When the winner twisted the loser's arm and kicked him off the platform, Yang Mingjiang did not say that the opponent was cruel and merciless. The 9th round of the actual combat lesson. When the winner kicked the loser out of the field, causing the loser to faint on the spot, Yang Mingjiang also did not say that the opponent was cruel and merciless. The 12th round of the actual combat lesson. The freshman Li Tianlan versus the senior Mo Han. There was no humiliation or delay. When Li Tianlan beat the senior Mo Han out of the field with one punch, Yang Mingjiang unexpectedly attacked Li Tianlan. A thunderous strike. Not only did he seriously injure Li Tianlan in an instant, but he was also cruel and merciless. He put the hat of not caring about his classmates and deducted 5 credits from him at the same time. Strange red blood spurted from Li Tianlan's mouth. Yang Mingjiang's kick was not a full force, but it was really powerful. When Yang Mingjiang lifted his foot, Li Tianlan didn't even have time to react before he was kicked into the air. His body hit the 2 students in the front row hard, and the whole phalanx was suddenly in chaos. Yang Mingjiang's smile was cold and playful. His kick on a person in the chi-controlling realm could not heal his injury without a month or 2, unless he used credits to exchange for some precious recovery potions, so that the time could be shortened. But in any case, no matter how terrifying Li Tianlan's potential was, some advantages would gradually shrink when he was injured. The actual combat lesson was held once every half a month, and he would be deducted 5 credits at one time. If he found a chance to kick him again, he would fall out of the class after 2 or 3 times at most. A student in an ordinary class could be killed easily by taking the opportunity of a maneuver. What was the big deal? Against Kunlun City, did you really think that Zhuang Huayang, an old headmaster who was about to retire, could save you? What a reckless thing. Bang! Li Tianlan's body finally fell to the ground. He closed his mouth tightly and swallowed his blood. For a while, he could not even say a word. "Senior brother," Wang Yuetong screamed. She squeezed through the crowd in front of her and rushed over. She subconsciously searched her body with one small hand. But the potion she carried had already been given to Li Tianlan a few days ago, and Li Tianlan fed it to Ning Qianqing. Now she had no potion on her. Li Tianlan held Wang Yuetong's palm. There seemed to be a lot of blood flowing fiercely between his chest and abdomen, and finally gushed up along his throat. The feeling was spicy and hot. He could only keep his mouth shut, endure the shock in his body, and try to calm down the power of Yang Mingjiang's kick. The entire scene was silent. No one looked at Yang Mingjiang, whose face was getting more and more playful. No one looked at Li Tianlan either. Everyone knew that Yang Mingjiang was a little unkind in this matter. It was obvious that he was targeting Li Tianlan, but the Sky Academy was obviously not a reasonable place. Moreover, Li Qianlon's combat capability just now also made every freshman feel a great threat. He was in the chi-controlling realm, but he could ignore the realm gap. Wouldn't it be more in their interests if such a person was targeted by Yang Mengjiang? So everyone was silent and looked on coldly. Even the two freshmen who had just been hit by Li Tianlong got up at once and stood back to their original positions, acting as if nothing had happened. Li Tianlong's face was pale, but his eyes were fixed on Yang Mengjiang. What? You're not convinced? Yang Mengjiang, who had been observing Li Tianlong's reaction, raised his eyebrows slightly and sneered. There was no change in Li Tianlong's eyes. It was not a kind of angry and resentful look, nor was there a panic in the face of absolute power. From his eyes, Yang Mengjiang could not even see the slightest emotional fluctuation. All he could see was darkness. It was as silent as the darkness of the eternal night. Li Tianlong swallowed the last mouthful of blood and gently patted the footprint on his chest. He laughed in a hoarse voice and said, "I'm not convinced." "What do you do if you're not convinced?" Yang Mengjiang said with a sinister smile. "This is my class, and I have the final say. Don't think that you're great because you have wind and thunder veins. Before you grow up, you're nothing. If you want to live a little longer, you'd better behave." He glanced at the other students and said coldly, "I'll say the same to you. In my class, you have to listen to me." He pointed at Li Tianlong and said with a grim smile, "Whoever is disobedient, he will be your example." "Are you done?" Wang Yuedong, who was supporting Li Tianlong, suddenly asked in a calm tone. Yang Mengjiang was slightly stunned. It seemed that he did not expect that Wang Yuedong would speak before Li Tianlong spoke. He had to be polite to the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai no matter what. He took a serious look at Wang Yuedong and said with a chuckle, "Your Highness, do you have any different opinions?" Then he heard the four words that he had heard countless times in his life, and also the words that he never thought would come out of Wang Yuedong's mouth. F***CKU. This was the first time in 19 years that Wang Yuedong swore. Her crisp and delicate voice echoed in the number one venue, and everyone was shocked. Yang Mengjiang's face changed. Before he could say anything, Wang Yuedong had attacked with all her strength. Her ruddy face suddenly turned pale, but her momentum skyrocketed. In an instant, she went from the peak of the ice-condensing realm to the fire-flaming realm, the prying realm, the stabilization realm, and directly to the peak. In the dark world, there were a few drugs that could forcibly improve one's realm in the face of danger. Because Li Tianlong had entered the thunder-shocking realm before, he could barely improve to the realm that he had reached before. But in the entire dark world, only the Wang family of Beihai had unique skills that could temporarily improve one's realm. For hundreds of years, this top wealthy family, which focused on extreme outbursts of unique skills, had been crazy about improving combat effectiveness. One of their unique skills was almost universal in the four realms of martial arts, from the chi-controlling realm to the thunder-shocking realm. It could improve one's strength by a whole realm. Although it could not break the threshold of the invincible realm, it was terrifying enough. This unique skill was the same as Li Tianlong's forcible improvement of realm. It burned potential, and if used too often, it would affect the foundation. But at this moment, Wang Yuedong, who was extremely angry, did not hesitate to use it. The unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai against the way of heaven. Go to hell. Two flames appeared on both sides of Wang Yuedong. There was wind. The two flames rose instantly. An unprecedented cold, killing intent kept blooming on Wang Yuedong. She suddenly screamed, and her clear voice echoed in the whole number one training ground in an instant. It was like the first cry of a phoenix, immature but still majestic. The two flames suddenly soared with the wind and rushed to Yang Mengjiang without reservation. A giant sword more than 10 meters long roared and condensed. The sword body was surrounded by flames, and it fell straight from the air dozens of meters high. The sword listens to the wind. The sword balances. The sword surges. The sword watches the fire. In an instant, Wang Yuedong raised all her combat effectiveness to the extreme. She released all her unique skills at the same time and threw them at Yang Mengjiang. The flames, the wind, and the giant sword gathered together in an instant. Wang Yuetong's body was full of strange phenomena, and there was a vague sense of sacredness and inviolability. A sharp and scorching aura seemed to bloom from nothingness. Wang Yuetong was not the only one who rushed to Yang Mengjiang. Li Beitian seemed to turn into a sword in an instant. Large flames flickered around him, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Li Beitian's sword intent was unprecedentedly condensed. He also attacked with all his strength without any reservation. At this moment, Li Beitian was the sword, and the sword was Li Beitian. He and the sword became one. His body passed through the large light and shadow created by Wang Yuetong. He raised one hand, and a dazzling sword light burst out instantly. It seemed to split the void, invisible and dangerous. The second style of Great Void Sword, unification of all swords. Ning Qiansheng was almost neck to neck with Li Beitian. They rushed into the light curtain at the same time. Li Beitian's sword was extremely heavy, but Ning Qiansheng's sword was extremely fast, like a beam of rainbow light. The flames in his hand rose, but they were still as cold as ice. The ice and fire formed a sword. In the blink of an eye, waves of sword chi roared and shot at Yang Mengjiang. Wang Yuetong attacked first, but it was Ning Qiansheng who attacked Yang Mengjiang first. One of the 7 swords of Jade Pool. Aurora glimpsed sword. Yu Qingyin's figure was 2 seconds slower. She, who had not really reached the peak of the ice-condensing realm, was undoubtedly the least noticeable, and her performance seemed to be very poor in actual combat experience. She staggered into the battle, stumbling. It seemed that she was more of a hindrance than a help. But in a place where no one noticed, one of Yu Qingyin's fingers had turned into a dazzling blood red. A drop of blood flowed from her fingertip and instantly seeped into her nail. Yi Huayu did not hesitate either. A long sword condensed from ice appeared behind her. She reached out to draw the sword. The sword suddenly rang out and went straight into the sky. In the crowd, Fan Haoyu had no time to hesitate. His fat body instantly knocked through the crowd in front of him. He clenched one hand into a fist. With a burst of dense cracking of joints, Fan Haoyu roared and punched Yang Mengjiang with a large piece of bright fire. A delicate short saber flew into the battlefield, followed by Du Hanin. The saber light was dazzling in the large light and shadow, spinning wildly. Wang Yuetong broke out the limit of the peak of the fire-flaming realm, and Fan Haoyu. 2 were at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. Li Beitian and Ning Qiansheng were both at the fire-flaming realm, and 3 were at the ice-condensing realm. 7 people, almost at the same time, attacked with all their strength and determination to kill. Yang Mengjiang, who was still waiting for Li Tianlan's reaction, changed his expression dramatically. He did not expect that by injuring Li Tianlan, he would poke such a big hornet's nest. Before Li Tianlan could fight back, so many people had jumped out to kill him. In a hurry, Yang Mengjiang only had time to set up a large piece of lightning in front of him. The giant sword in the air, surrounded by flames, crashed to the ground. Lightning, raging fire, sword intent, and ice light, everything intertwined and exploded in an instant. Large pieces of sparks and broken ice spread endlessly in the violent shock waves. Li Tianlan, who had just caught his breath, had no time to think. He got up and was about to rush to the battlefield. A strong arm suddenly grabbed Li Tianlan's arm. Li Tianlan suddenly looked back. In his sight, a handsome young man chuckled and said, "It's okay. Yang Mengjiang doesn't dare to kill them. But if you go up now, it's hard to say." He paused and continued with a smile. "I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sumai." The light in the field finally dissipated. The violent shock waves swept through the crowd. Except for a few experts at the peak of the fire-flaming realm and the ice-condensing realm, everyone fell to the ground in disorder, struggling to get up. Whether standing or lying down, everyone's eyes were filled with a kind of extremely obvious complexity and fear, which was difficult to understand. In recent years, it seemed to be the first time that a student took the initiative to besiege a teacher in the Sky Academy. It was unimaginable how far-reaching the impact of this incident was. What happened today might become a legend for a long time. Everyone looked at Li Tianlan in a daze. Although Li Tianlan did not participate in this siege, it started because of him. Did this freshman, who was only in the chi-controlling realm, really have some magic? Li Tianlan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and stared at the battlefield. After an extreme outburst, Wang Yuetong's aura was fluctuating violently. She seemed to be at the peak of the ice-condensing realm or the peak of the fire-flaming realm. Her state looked extremely unstable. Li Beitian and Ning Qiansheng, on the other hand, had consumed too much energy. Their bodies, which used to be straight, were gradually hunched. Fan Haoyu, Du Hanin, and Yi Huayu all looked fine. Only Yu Qingyin's face was even paler than Wang Yuetong's. Her body trembled uncontrollably. She did not look like she was injured, but rather frightened. Yang Mengjiang, who was surrounded by everyone, was in a more difficult situation than anyone else. His camouflage uniform was almost completely torn, and a large part of his hair was burnt. Dark red blood flowed out of his mouth, and he coughed out large mouthfuls of blood. After a while, he barely managed to stand up. I'll tell my father what happened here right away. I'd like to know whether the Sky Academy is the Special Warfare Academy of Zhongzhou State or the backyard of Kunlun City. I also want to know who gave you the courage to be so lawless and unscrupulous to target a freshman. Wang Yuetong's cold and indifferent voice sounded. Her tone was firm and cold. Mount Shu also has the same question. Li Beitian sneered and said, "The Sky Academy is in a foul atmosphere." A stupid deputy director came out of the entrance maneuver and attacked a freshman. In the first class, a teacher leader of the actual combat course, also targeted a freshman. Everything is King done by Kunlun City. It's disgusting. Mount Shu would like to ask whether Gu Xingyun of Kunlun City is the god of war of Zhongzhou State who protects Zhongzhou State, or the local emperor who acts like a tyrant in Zhongzhou State. Dongqing Clan and Jade Pool also have the same question. Kunlun City had better come up with a reasonable explanation in the high-level meeting. Not only Kunlun City, but also the Sky Academy should give us an explanation. If there's no explanation, I don't want to study in such an academy. I'd like to see how you, Yang Mengjiang, will behave after you deliberately suppress the freshman because of your standpoint and Gu Yunxia's reputation of siding with the same party and eliminating the dissidents spreads throughout Zhongzhou State. I'll tell my family everything that happened today and then report it to the army headquarters. I can testify to everything that happened today on any occasion and guarantee the authenticity of every word I said. Fan Haoyu said with a poker face. Yu. Yang Mengjiang spat out a mouthful of blood again. He stared at the group of freshmen in front of him and gnashed his teeth. You owe my man an apology, Wang Yuetong said coldly. Now you must give it back to him. Wang Yuetong, who called herself his woman for the first time, felt more and more proud in her heart, but she also felt a little distressed. Yang Mengjiang gritted his teeth and sneered. What if I refuse? Then I'll kill you. A low and hoarse voice suddenly sounded. Yang Mengjiang's expression changed. Before he could speak, a black shadow appeared directly in front of him. The shadow raised its arm, and the air around its arm slightly vibrated. 100 meters away, the figure of tribulation appeared beside Zhuang Huayang. He crossed his hands slightly in front of his chest. With a click, 2 arm knives popped out of his sleeves, shining with cold light. At the same time, the shadow in front of Yang Mengjiang also stretched out 2 arm knives that were completely condensed from air. Since when does Sai City like to meddle in other people's business? If he doesn't apologize, I'll kill him. He forced the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai to burn her potential. I'd like to see if Gu Xingyun dares to ask for an explanation from His Majesty after I kill him. The enchantress's husky and sexy voice was full of coldness, and every word was as sharp as a blade. Wang Yuetong breathed a sigh of relief. Her extremely strong, but rather unstable state fluctuated violently and quickly fell. Her face was still pale. She slowly walked to Li Tianlan and held his hand. Yang Mingjiang, who had just looked down upon the freshman, froze in place. His face turned red, but he did not speak. Everyone's body slightly relaxed. Only Yu Qingyin's body was still trembling slightly. Ning Qiansheng looked distressed. He subconsciously walked over and whispered, "Qingyin, it's okay. Since you've chosen the Sky Academy, you'll encounter these things in the future. Are you afraid of blood?" Yu Qingyin's face was pale, and she shook her head slightly. In fact, she was not particularly afraid of the swords and sabers in the dark world. It was just her first experience that made her feel that everything was different from what she had imagined. What no one knew was that just now, she killed someone. This was the first time in her life that she had killed someone. Zhuang Huayang had already walked to the bottom of the platform with a group of high-level school officials. Tribulation, Gu Yunxia, the Enchantress, Yi Fengsheng, Qin Ke. A group of high-level school officials surrounded Zhuang Huayang, waiting for his attitude. Zhuang Huayang smiled softly and said calmly, "This term Sky Academy is indeed a bit foul." Beside him, Gu Yunxia's face changed slightly, but she did not speak. This term Sky Academy was filled with too many games and power tricks when arranging the list of high-level school officials. Zhuang Huayang's words obviously meant something. However, Zhuang Huayang did not say much. As if he had said it casually, he directly set his eyes on Yang Mengjiang. "I don't want to know the process for the time being," Zhuang Huayang said indifferently. "Obviously, you've incurred public anger. That's wrong, so you should apologize. Headmaster Li Tianlan is cruel and merciless." Yang Mengjiang opened his mouth subconsciously. "Teacher Yang." Gu Yunxiao winked at him and said calmly, "What you did today was indeed inappropriate. You should apologize." Yang Mengjiang's body stiffened where he was. He looked at Tribulation, whose eyes were sharp and piercingly cold, and then at the Enchantress, who was full of hidden, killing intent. He did not speak for a long time. "I'll count to 3. If you don't come here, I'll ask Sixth Sister to kill you." Wang Yuetong suddenly said coldly, "1. Gu Yunxia's face changed slightly, and she said in a slightly heavier tone, "Teacher Yang." Yang Mengjiang let out a bitter laugh. He felt blood gushing out of his throat again. He forcefully swallowed the blood in his mouth. Tasting the taste of blood in his mouth, he felt a sense of emptiness in his body. Even his legs felt weak. He walked with difficulty to Li Tianlan and said in a hoarse voice, "Li Tianlan, what I did just now was inappropriate. I apologize to you." Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and smiled. Under the gaze of the higher-ups of the school, he suddenly lifted his leg and kicked Yang Mengjiang in the chest. In the same position, but the difference was that Li Tianlan used all his strength. Bang! Yang Mengjiang's body flew high. Whether by coincidence or on purpose, his body landed in front of Gu Yunxia at her feet. Chapter 114. No one expected that an ordinary actual combat lesson would turn into such a situation. Several of the most promising experts in the class besieged the tutor. The headmaster, the director of the teaching office, the director of the political department, and other senior officials were present at the same time. Yang Mengjiang, who was also a senior official of the school, apologized to a freshman in person. What was even more unexpected was that Yang Mengjiang actually rejected him and even kicked him in the same way that Yang Mengjiang did earlier. Although he was injured, the strength and speed of the wind and thunder veins were terrifying. Especially in terms of strength, Li Tianlan was in the chi-controlling realm, but his pure strength was not inferior to that of an expert in the fire-flaming realm. Yang Mengjiang had been seriously injured by the siege. Under Li Tianlan's kick, his body flew back nearly 20 meters and landed in front of Gu Yunxia, coughing up blood. For a moment, he couldn't even move. "I don't accept it." His calm and gentle voice resounded throughout the entire venue, without the slightest bit of anger or pleasure, but everyone who heard this sentence felt their scalps go numb for no reason. This kid was really too strong-willed. Gu Yunxia's eyes flashed with viciousness and resentment. She squatted down slightly, helped Yang Mengjiang up, and handed him to the assistant beside her. When she straightened up again, she had a gentle and calm smile on her face. What Mr. Yang did today was really inappropriate. She paused, and her voice became softer and softer. She whispered, "The school will discuss a punishment decision as soon as possible. I don't know if you're satisfied with this explanation, Tianlan." "I'm not satisfied," Li Tianlan said with a smile. He barely suppressed his injury and moved his body. There was suddenly a strong fighting, like a raging fire in his pupils. "What do you want, Tianlan?" Gu Yunxia narrowed her eyes and said in a feminine tone, but her fingers unconsciously contracted. This was her almost instinctive action every time she wanted to kill someone. Today's matter involved the Wang family of Beihai, Mount Shu, and Jade Pool, and the academics in Sai City. This seemed to be a small matter, but if it was not handled well, it would become extremely troublesome. Therefore, Gu Yunxia had made up her mind to compromise for the time being. After this matter was over, she still had ways to deal with Li Tianlan. "I just said I'm not satisfied. What can I do?" Li Tianlan chuckled and said, "There are some things that you can't do without strength, no matter how unwilling you are. Director Gu, am I right?" He calmly glanced around and continued, "That's why I just want to continue my lessons. However, there's no need to trouble Teacher Yang to name names. Since it's an actual combat class that can strengthen one's combat strength and allow one to get to know one another better, then let's be more straightforward. Among the freshmen, there are a few that I want to challenge, so I hope that the teachers can fulfill my wish." Gu Yunxia's expression changed slightly, and she subconsciously glanced in the direction of Gu Yulan. Her soft eyes gradually turned cold, and there was a hint of threat in her eyes. Li Qianlan's smile was gentle like a breeze, but there was a hint of undisguised, killing intent in his eyes when he looked at Gu Yunxia. Their gazes collided in the air, and it was a tit-for-tat. In the gloomy sky, the atmosphere suddenly became bleak. "Tianlan, do you insist?" Gu Yunxia asked slowly. Her words could be interpreted as a threat, but they could also be interpreted as her last warning. Li Tianlan stopped talking nonsense. He held Wang Yuedong's hand and walked back to the platform step by step with firm steps. "Tianlan, you're injured." Zhuang Huayang frowned slightly. He didn't know how seriously Tianlan's injury was, but in this case, since he was injured, it was better not to fight. He could vent his anger at any time. "It's okay," Li Tianlan said without looking back. Gu Yunxia glanced at Li Tianlan coldly, then looked at Zhuang Huayang and said softly, "Please make a decision, headmaster." "I agree." Before Zhuang Huayang could speak, the enchantress made her attitude clear. "I have no objection either." Yi Fengcheng looked at Li Tianlan's figure on the platform with interest, and the appreciation in his eyes grew stronger. Zhuang Huayang glanced at Tribulation beside him, intentionally or unintentionally. Tribulation didn't say a word. His figure gradually became distorted and illusory. A black shadow appeared in front of Zhuang Huayang, but he himself had already left the #1 training ground. Was this a tacit agreement? Zhuang Huayang narrowed his eyes and nodded. "That's it. Tianlan, who do you want to challenge?" Li Tianlan had already stepped onto the platform. On the 3-meter-high platform, in the gloomy sky, Li Tianlan's figure seemed very small, but was extremely clearly reflected in everyone's sight. Them. Li Tianlan pointed in a direction. In the direction he pointed, most of the freshmen he pointed at scattered instinctively, and a small group close together appeared in everyone's sight. In the crowd, Gu Yulan stared at Li Tianlan's finger pointing at her. She pursed her red lips and said nothing, but her eyes were full of killing intent. Lu Dongyu, who was also pointed at, remained calm. Su Yunzong, the most irascible one, suddenly clenched his fist and said in a ferocious tone, "I'll go and meet him." "Stop," Gu Yulan said in a flat tone. "Of course you'll go, but not now." Her eyes turned slightly and finally stopped on several ice-condensing realm experts on the periphery. She said in a soft and sweet voice, "You guys go up. Don't rush to finish the fight quickly. Drag him with all your might and consume his strength. Several ice-condensing realm experts from the flames of war looked pale. They looked at each other and subconsciously looked at Lu Dongyu. Go, Lu Dongyu said with a dull face. The one being challenged, come up. Zhuang Huayang's voice sounded. As a headmaster, he personally presided over an actual combat lesson. This lesson was of a high standard. An ice-condensing realm expert stepped forward. His face was pale. Standing in front of Li Tianlan, he opened his mouth and said slowly, "My name is..." Before he finished his words, Li Tianlan's figure had directly appeared in front of him. He punched. The human emperor did not show up. Li Tianlan's joints all over his body shook wildly. He concentrated all his strength into one punch and hit the opponent's chest hard. On the platform, all the air shook violently and then twisted wildly. In the gloomy and cold air, there seemed to be a sudden wind, fierce and overbearing. The ice-condensing realm expert who had just stepped onto the platform suddenly changed his expression. He subconsciously crossed his hands in front of his chest. Li Tianlan's punch came across the air. Cruel and merciless? A trace of ferocity flashed in his eyes. Endless hostility filled his heart and spread all over his body. I'll show you what is really cruel and merciless. Bang! The crazy power went through his arms and hit his chest. On the platform, which was covered by the twisted air and looked a little fuzzy, a low but dull and desperate scream, accompanied by the sound of bones breaking, rang out. The ice-condensing realm expert from the flames of war had just stepped onto the platform and was blown off the platform like a sandbag. The punch hit his chest through his arms, but a lot of blood burst out his back. The lonely and desperate figure crossed the platform and fell heavily in front of Gu Yunxia. He twitched twice and then stopped moving. Next, Li Tianlan said calmly. Gu Yunxia finally could not keep the smile on her face. Her expression became extremely gloomy. An ice-condensing realm expert was nothing in Kunlun City. But the flames of war, whether in the Sky Academy or in Kunlun City, was a force of Kunlun City. Li Tianlan deliberately punched an elite of the flames of war in front of him. Gu Yunxia felt as if someone had slapped her in the face. It was a burning pain. She squatted down and checked the injury of the injured person. She suddenly raised her head, and her eyes seemed to be spewing fire. Under the punch, all the bones of the student in front of her had been completely broken, and his internal organs were almost completely destroyed. With such an injury, he would not die as long as he was treated in time, but it would be extremely difficult for him to recover. Li Tianlan did not kill anyone in the actual combat lesson, but what was the difference between such a method and killing him? Cruel and merciless, cruel and merciless. Gu Yunxia thought of Yang Mengjiang's comment. She gritted her teeth and said nothing. Bang! On the platform, Li Tianlan moved like a dragon. The second elite of the flames of war had just stood firm when Li Tianlan kicked him in the abdomen again. A lot of blood burst out of his body like a blood mist. His body fell down the platform along the same trajectory and fell beside Gu Yunxia again. Headmaster. Seeing all this with his own eyes, Yang Mengjiang's lips trembled and stars flashed before his eyes. There was no doubt that this was Li Tianlan's most powerful counterattack to his words of being cruel and merciless. Li Tianlan only broke his opponent's arm with one punch in the first battle. How was that cruel and merciless? In front of him, he only used one move to completely destroy his opponent in one move. Such a style was really cruel and merciless. Go on, Li Tianlan said softly with a mellow and gentle smile. Headmaster, look at what he is doing. These are all elites of our Kunlun City, no, the Sky Academy. Headmaster, this guy should be killed. Yang Mengjiang shouted in a trembling voice. Because of extreme anger, his dark face had turned blood red. All your Kunlun City? Did he finally let it slip? Zhuang Huayang's eyes turned cold. He took a deep look at Yang Mengjiang and said casually, Tianlan, be careful. Okay. Li Tianlan nodded and smiled, but in his mind he thought of Lu Xiuwei, who had died in his hands, Yang Mengjiang's kick just now, and Kunlun City. It was an organization that took it for granted to bully others and said that the other party should be killed when being bullied. What a great power center of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. Li Tianlan smiled and looked at his opponent, who walked to the high platform with an uneasy face. His figure flashed, and he kicked again. Bang! The same bloody mist broke out in the sky. But this time, the opponent did not fly out of the high platform. Li Tianlan's foot fell on him, and all the power exploded in his body in an instant. There was a thud. His body fell to the ground, and he died on the spot. Li Tianlan looked at Yang Mengjiang with a playful look in his eyes. It was a look that Yang Mengjiang was very familiar with. Just now, he looked at Li Tianlan with this kind of look, provocative and cruel. Puff! Yang Mengjiang spat out another mouthful of blood and was on the verge of collapse. Li Tianlan kicked the body in front of him off the high platform and continued, "Who else?" The corner of Gu Yunxia's mouth moved. She forced herself to swallow the blood that gushed out of her throat, turned silently, and said coldly, "Let's go." With the support of the headmaster, Li Tianlan was unscrupulous. Gu Yunxia didn't want to see what would happen next. She turned around, asked her assistant to support Yang Mengjiang, and left directly. Director Gu. On the high platform, Li Tianlan suddenly spoke in a flat voice. Gu Yunxia suddenly turned around, and her killing intent soared. She said coldly, "What's the matter?" "Nothing." Li Tianlan burst out laughing and said in a clear and bright voice, "Have I ever told you that you're so ugly, just like an old witch? Young and vigorous, young and frivolous." "Ha ha!" Beside Zhuang Huayang, a burst of laughter suddenly sounded. Yi Fengcheng looked at Li Tianlan with appreciation and said, "Well said, Tianlan. Based on what you said, when your injury is healed, I must drink with you." Yi Fengcheng was called a madman in Yuzhou. He was arrogant and unruly. If it weren't for his fearlessness, he wouldn't have come to the Sky Academy to be a director of the political department. This position seemed to be prominent, but compared with the power of the Yi family, it was almost equivalent to being sent to the frontier. Gu Yunxia stood there stiffly. After 5 minutes, she took a deep look at Li Tianlan, turned around, and left. Li Tianlan glanced at his back, then turned around and asked Gu Yulan, "Who else?" "I'll do it." Su Yunzong suddenly roared. Ignoring Gu Yulan's eyes, he stepped toward the high platform step by step. Flames rose from his body. At this moment, Su Yunzong was like a sun, scorching and cruel. He stepped onto the high platform. Without a word, he roared and rushed directly to Li Tianlan. He completely condensed the innate divine power given to him by the Thunder Vein. In the flames, the whole high platform shook wildly as he sprinted. He moved faster and faster, like a giant beast. The air in front of Li Tianlan was completely twisted. In a trance, he seemed to be pushing a side of the world forward. He controlled the air to form the wind. The wind suddenly rose. The flames were blown away by the wind. The two approached each other in an instant. What appeared in front of Su Yunzong was also a tightly clenched iron fist. Su Yunzong roared and raised his hand to meet the fist without hesitation. Crack! Their fists retracted as soon as they touched. Li Tianlan suddenly took a step forward. The twisted air whistled wildly around him. Li Tianlan took the opportunity to turn around and hit Su Yunzong's chest hard with his elbow. Bang! Su Yunzong suffered a heavy blow, but he refused to retreat. The air around him had turned into blades of wind. In an instant, his burly body was covered in blood, but the expression on his face grew more and more ferocious. He grabbed Li Tianlan's arm and roared. With a furious roar, he swung Li Tianlan's body up and flung him hard. Boom! Li Tianlan's body rubbed against the ground, leaving a shocking trail of blood. He hit the iron railings around the high platform. The railings, which were surrounded by thick and long steel bars, were instantly deformed. Li Tianlan spat out a mouthful of blood, but he continued to rush forward without hesitation. Su Yunzong, who was also covered in blood, held a flaming long saber in his hand. The flames around him bloomed to the extreme, and he slashed at Li Tianlan. 3 elements, final hit. It was the core unique skill of Kunlun City, the 10 skills of true martial arts. The 10th skill was known as the strongest in the invincible realm, and the other 9 skills were also outstanding in each realm. The human emperor in Li Tianlan's hand stretched out. In the silver flowing light, he held a long spear. The spear smashed hard on the ground. Boom! The 3-meter-high platform, which was extremely solid with a large number of steel bars and concrete, suddenly shook. On the floor, countless dust and gravel mixed with steel bars flew out and hit Su Yunzong. Su Yunzong waved his saber wildly, destroying everything. Li Tianlan, who was faster than him, took advantage of the length of the weapon and stabbed his spear directly at Su Yunzong's chest. The sound was ear-piercing. Li Tianlan's figure seemed to have completely melted into the air, blurring. Only the silver spear shone brightly and moved forward. Su Yunzong could only retreat. One advanced, and the other retreated. The distance of more than 10 meters was covered in a flash. Su Yunzong's huge body hit the railings on the edge of the high platform, and his whole body turned quickly against the railings. The silver spear stabbed into the gap between the railings. Before Su Yunzong could fight back, Li Tianlan's silver spear suddenly rose. Bang! Under the huge force, the silver spear directly smashed the steel railings. Dust flew up from the edge of the high platform, and all the steel bars were broken into countless pieces in an instant, shooting off the platform. Fierce and violent. A chi-controlling realm martial artist fighting against a fire-flaming realm martial artist. Li Tianlan's eyes were dark, and he seemed to have gone completely crazy. The silver spear whistled and danced in the flames and twisted air. The whole high platform was in danger in the battle between the two. Su Yunzong, who was dodging in a panic, looked furious. The long saber in his hand disappeared, and in an instant, the flames scattered. The 4th move of the 10 skills of true martial arts. 4 moves to 1. Watch out! Under the platform, Gu Yulan, who was supposed to be full of confidence, suddenly narrowed her eyes and gave a warning. In a place that no one noticed, a figure that was exactly the same as Li Tianlan suddenly appeared behind Su Yunzong. It was a vivid imitation of Li Tianlan. The flames of 4 moves to 1 gathered in front of Su Yunzong and instantly surrounded Li Tianlan. The air in front of him fluctuated slightly. Li Tianlan stood quietly, motionless. But in everyone's sight, Li Tianlan had already switched places with the shadow. He raised his spear and whistled down. The shadow in front of Su Yunzong was swallowed by the flames and instantly disappeared. The silver spear whistled all over the sky and hit Su Yunzong's head without reservation. Boom! The high platform, which was on the verge of collapse, collapsed with a loud bang in the last shot. In the smoke and snow mist, Su Yunzong's body completely collapsed under the spear. Only flesh and blood flew all over the sky, and he died without a whole body. Cruel and ruthless. When the extreme violence was deduced to the extreme, it was an art that was enough to make everyone's scalp numb and heart tremble. An art that was cruel and bloody to the extreme. The smoke and dust drifted. In the ruins of the high platform, only Li Tianlan's voice continued to ring. Who else? On this day, in the first actual combat lesson since the beginning of the Sky Academy, Yang Mengjiang, the tutor of the actual combat lesson, was seriously injured. 2 people died, and 2 were seriously injured in the class. 4 people were removed from a class. The flames of war, which had been awe-inspiring in the Sky Academy last time, was almost gone. And Li Tianlan's seemingly calm but insolent momentum was close to baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. Su Yunzong, a fire-flaming realm expert and a young core disciple of Kunlun City, died. Gu Yulan. Chapter 115. Su Yunzong died in the battle. The flames of war was almost removed from the Sky Academy. Now that things had escalated to this point, the actual combat class that was halfway through was naturally left unsettled. After the bodies and the wounded were carried away, Zhuang Huayang dismissed the team and personally sent Li Tianlan back to the dormitory. He was not afraid that Gu Yunxia and others would attack Li Tianlan. He did this to express his attitude to the whole academy. Li Qianlon's face grew paler, but after restraining his killing intent, his aura had completely stabilized. The benefits brought to him by that set of immortality potion were almost unimaginable. As soon as the injury broke out in his body, the vitality locked by the longevity lock in his body began to surge and break through the blockage, quickly healing his injury. After the fierce battle, although his injury could not be said to be completely healed, it was basically not a big problem. His body, which originally needed a month to recuperate, now seemed to be completely better in a week at most. Even Li Tianlan himself was a little stunned by such an effect. The most precious treasure of the Wang family of Beihai was just like their unique skill. Its effect could be said to be against the natural order. In contrast, Wang Yuedong's state could be said to be the worst. Although the process of upgrading from the peak of the ice-condensing realm was very short, her consumption was unimaginable. The so-called consumption of potential was temporarily unfathomable, but the consumption of physical strength and spirit was extremely obvious. As soon as she returned to the dormitory, she put her arms around Li Tianlan's waist, muttered that she was sleepy, and then directly closed her eyes behind Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan found it funny, but also felt distressed. He could borrow the power of the ice-condensing realm or even the fire-flaming realm when he was in the chi-controlling realm, because he had reached that realm before. But Wang Yuedong did not recultivate. Her improvement was completely using the combat strength that should not have belonged to her. In doing so, she needed to pay a much higher price than Li Tianlan. Now Wang Yuedong was almost in a state of half coma and half sleep, and no one knew how long she would rest this time. He carefully carried Wang Yuedong into the bedroom, put her body on the bed, and carefully covered her with a quilt. Wang Yuedong, who was out of Li Tianlan's arms, seemed to move a little uneasily. Her little hands subconsciously grasped the quilt, and she slowly calmed down. Appreciating the little princess's quiet and delicate sleeping posture, Li Tianlan's heart was filled with tenderness. He lowered his head and kissed Wang Yuedong's face gently. Then he straightened up and walked out of the bedroom. In the living room, Li Beitian was standing beside Zhuang Huayang and bragging. Li Tianlan didn't know what he had said before. When he came out, Li Beitian was already halfway through his speech. I was by Tianlan's side at that time. Headmaster, you didn't see it at that time. Tianlan just raised the brush and waved it. Did you see that? The 3 words, East Emperor Palace, were written in one go. The whole living room was filled with sword energy, including the floor, the walls, and the furniture. They couldn't even withstand a single blow. Let me tell you, cough. Li Tianlan couldn't bear it anymore. He coughed and interrupted Li Beitian's serious bragging. It was fine if Li Beitian exaggerated a little occasionally, but Li Beitian didn't know him. He wrote the 3 words East Emperor Palace for nearly a day, but Li Beitian wrote it in one go. It was outrageous. However, Zhuang Huayang didn't seem to pay attention to what Li Beitian said. He just looked at the wall, covered with sword marks with a calm expression. The sword marks filled with pure sword essence were like a beautiful painting in his eyes. It was so beautiful that it fascinated him. Did you do it? Zhuang Huayang glanced at Li Tianlan, who walked out of the bedroom, and said with a smile. Li Tianlan braced himself and said calmly, I'm going to talk to the headmaster about this. These furniture need to be changed. I still have credits here. It should be enough to deduct. Okay. Zhuang Huayang thought for a while and said slowly, I won't deduct credits. The college will help you change the furniture, but I hope the wall will remain the same. These sword marks, just stay here. Li Tianlan was stunned and looked at Zhuang Huayang. Zhuang Huayang didn't look at Li Tianlan, but still looked at the countless sword marks on the wall. He said softly, This is a treasure, Tianlan. The sword energy left here may disappear soon, but the pure sword intent will always exist. After you graduate, if someone lives in your dormitory and looks at these sword marks, they can almost be said to be your students if they become successful in the future. Just leave the wall like this. The Sky Academy also needs such a special dormitory. Li Tianlan nodded casually. He was not interested in being a student for the time being. With his current realm at the peak of the chi-controlling realm, he was really not qualified to be someone else's teacher. The sword intent on the surrounding walls was pure, but it wouldn't reveal the unique skills of the Li family. Since he could keep it without deducting credits, he naturally wouldn't have any objection. Zhuang Huayang's eyes fell on the plaque in front of him again. He stared at the three words that even stung his eyes when he first saw them. He said softly, "East Emperor Palace. Is this the name of your team?" Li Tianlan said yes. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked calmly, "Headmaster, is there anything wrong with this name?" "No, it's good." Zhuang Huayang smiled and said, "It sounds a little bold." Li Tianlan looked at his expression seriously. He asked again, "Headmaster, haven't you heard the name East Emperor?" Zhuang Huayang looked at Li Tianlan with a smile. When he saw Li Tianlan's serious face, he suddenly froze. "I haven't heard of it." Zhuang Huayang shook his head and said, "I know a mythical figure called East Emperor Tai." "Why? Do you mean this East Emperor has a background?" "How can the heavenly son of Zhongzhou State in recent decades have no background?" Li Tianlan said flatly. "His name is Dongsheng Huangtu." He didn't know why he was so attached to this name. Every time he thought of this name, with infinite contradictions and mysteries, he would subconsciously figure it out. Maybe it was because of the notebook in Qin Weibai's hand. Or maybe it was because of Qin Weibai's sad and helpless eyes when she mentioned this name. Heavenly Son? Zhuang Huayang raised his eyebrows in surprise. He took a deep look at Li Tianlan and said slowly, "How can there be any heavenly son in recent decades?" This word is not used casually. Even if others use this word, they will add some modifiers in front of it. For example, Wang Shengxiao and Gu Hanshan are known as young heavenly sons. The word young is the most important. This generation's Wang Shengxiao, the previous generation's tribulation, and the previous generation's Wang Tianzong can only be regarded as people with the potential to become heavenly sons. For hundreds of years, only the ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai can be called a heavenly son. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly. His eyes were complicated, but he still didn't give up and asked, "Headmaster, haven't you heard of Dongsheng Huangtu? Sounds like a member of the Dongsheng family." Zhuang Huayang looked at Li Tianlan strangely and said, "I haven't heard of him." Li Tianlan was silent. Zhuang Huayang was an old fox at his age. What he thought, and even the emotions on the surface, were not what he could figure out now. He couldn't tell whether Zhuang Huayang was telling the truth or not. If what he said wasn't true, then what kind of secret was hidden behind the name Dongsheng Huangtu that people like Zhuang Huayang still didn't want to talk about it after so many years after his death? A dignified heaven's chosen one, yet he was unknown. How ironic was that? But if what he said was true, what did that mean? Zhuang Huayang, who was nearly 70 years old, was a general of Zhongzhou State, but he hadn't even heard of Dongsheng Huangtu's name. If that was the truth, that could only mean one thing. Dongsheng Huangtu didn't exist. "Tianlan?" Zhuang Huayang frowned and asked, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Li Tianlan shook his head, feeling complicated. "It's good that you're fine. Take care of yourself. I suggest you take some Chinese medicine. As for gene potions like healing, you can only use them for emergencies. Take as little as you can." Zhuang Huayang glanced at Li Tianlan and said, "I'm going to Yuzhou soon. Let's talk about other things when I come back." Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed. Zhuang Huayang going to Yuzhou? At this time, it was most likely that he went to Yuzhou for the murder of Gu Changjiang. An expert at the level of governor was killed in his own country, which was enough to cause a sensation in the whole Zhongzhou state. So even if he knew that Zhuang Huayang had nothing to do with this trip, Li Tianlan still felt a little nervous subconsciously. "I'm fine." Zhuang Huayang shook his head and said with a light smile. Li Tianlan nodded slightly and didn't say much. Zhuang Huayang turned around and was about to leave. He glanced around casually and happened to see Yu Qingyin standing in the corner. Yu Qingyin's pretty face was pale, and she still stood there in a daze, as if she was lost in thought. "Qingyin, are you all right?" Zhuang Huayang asked with concern. He and Yu Donglai were old friends for many years. Now that Yu Donglai handed his granddaughter to him, He must fulfill his responsibility. I'm fine. Yu Qingyan became alert, shook her head in a panic, and stammered, I'm going to call Grandpa. She turned around and trotted straight to the bedroom. Zhuang Huayang smiled thoughtfully and left quickly. In the bedroom, Yu Qingyan sat on the bed, holding the phone nervously, waiting for the call to be connected. The phone rang twice. Yu Donglai's kind and soft voice sounded, which made Yu Qingyan calm down. Qingyan, what's wrong? You just left and you miss Grandpa? Grandpa. Yu Qingyan's inner nervousness gradually disappeared, but she still stammered. What's wrong? Did someone bully you? Where's Tianlan? Give him the phone. Yu Qingyan suddenly became nervous. He loved this precious granddaughter from the bottom of his heart and was afraid that she would be wronged. If he didn't spoil her, Yu Qingyan might have a different character today. No. Yu Qingyan took a deep breath and said softly, Grandpa, Yang Mengjiang bullied brotherly. In the class, just now, Sister Yuedong led us to seriously injure Yang Mengjiang. At the other end of the phone, Yu Donglai's breath paused, and he said softly, and then, Yu Qingyan hesitated, lowered her voice again, and said in a trembling voice, and then I used a drop of cardinal blood. The other end of the phone suddenly fell into a dead silence. Cardinal. This was something that only he and Yu Qingyan knew. Over the years, Yu Donglai had spent more time and energy on the linnet than on Yu Qingyan. In 20 years, the linnet had taken shape. If it evolved once with external forces, it would become a vermilion bird. This was the most poisonous thing in the world. Its toxicity was as fierce as raging fire and could be called unparalleled in the world. A drop of cardinal blood, Yu Donglai pondered for a long time before he took a deep breath and said gently, It's okay. Qingyan, you did the right thing. Don't worry. His voice was still old and tired, but this time there was a hint of pride in it. Yu Qingyan nodded her little head hard and said yes. Bastard, this bastard. I must kill him, kill him. In the director's office, Gu Yunxia's assistant helped Yang Mengjiang to sit on the sofa. Yang Mengjiang, who had been silent all the way, finally couldn't help but roar angrily after entering the office. Gu Yunxia stood in front of the window and took a deep breath before she slowly turned around and sighed. Mengjiang, this time we were careless. Who could have thought that Wang Yuedong, Li Beitian, and Ning Qianxing would risk their lives for that guy? It seems that their relationship is not simple. Wang Yuetong fell in love with him in just a few days. This is the most unexpected thing. Yang Mengjiang pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and took a big puff. The smoke entered his lungs. Yang Mengjiang was so angry that he only felt a burning heat all over his body. He shook his head in annoyance and did not speak. Let's find another chance later. This time we can't just let it go, but we have to pay attention to the way in the future. Gu Yunxia pondered and said word by word, Outside the Sky Academy, that guy is a nonentity. But at least in the academy, he has now become a figure that can't be ignored. We can't continue to fight on a small scale. Next time we take action, we must be clean and neat and don't leave any evidence. Yang Mengjiang took a big puff of the cigarette and nodded. The burning feeling on his body was getting stronger and stronger. In the blink of an eye, he was sweating all over. Gu Yunxia, who knew his bad temper, only thought that he was angry and didn't think much about it. She took out her mobile phone and said with a smile, Take a seat first. I'll go to the lounge to call the governor. Yang Mengjiang nodded and watched Gu Yunxia's back disappear. He lit another cigarette. The heat spread from the soles of his feet and kept rising, surpassing his chest and abdomen. The rolling heat waves rushed straight to his brain. Yang Mengjiang even felt that his body was on fire. He put out the cigarette, looked at Gu Yunxia's assistant, and frowned. Do you have water? I want ice. Yes, the assistant said in a soft voice. She was also a freshman who graduated from the Sky Academy. In that year, she was also a famous beauty. After graduating and staying at the school, she followed Gu Yunxia and naturally became a bargaining chip for Gu Yunxia to win over some of her confidants. Not only Yang Mengjiang, but even many promising ordinary male teachers had tasted her. There's a refrigerator in the lounge. I'll get you some water. The assistant smiled charmingly and turned to the lounge. This slut. Yang Mingjiang stared at the assistant's swaying soft buttocks with fiery eyes, and his heart was getting hotter and hotter. It was on fire. Yang Mingjiang only felt that the fire in his body was getting stronger and stronger, and he could hardly suppress it. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but he didn't make a sound for a while. Yang Mingjiang's face changed, and he finally realized that there was something wrong with the heat in his body. He subconsciously put his hand into his mouth, and his face instantly became desperate and pale. In a short time, the tongue in his mouth had disappeared, and even his teeth were melting rapidly. The burning heat instantly turned into a big fire. It was really on fire. The strange green flame instantly sprang out of his body and instantly spread all over his body. Yang Mengjiang's face twisted, and his body twitched in the flame, but he couldn't even make a sound. In a very short time, his body twitched more and more weakly, and finally stopped moving and then burned rapidly with the sofa. Crack! The door of the lounge was pulled open. The assistant, who was smiling charmingly and even a little slutty, walked out of the lounge with a bottle of ice water. She glanced in the direction of the sofa and suddenly froze. In the office, Yang Mengjiang's figure had disappeared, and with him, the whole sofa disappeared. The place was empty, as if nothing had ever existed. The secretary was stunned, turned around subconsciously, and hurried back to the lounge. In the lounge, Gu Yunxiao looked serious and silently put down the phone. The assistant held the water tightly in her hand and said nervously, "Director, Mr. Yang has left, and he stole our sofa." Yang Mengjiang? Stole the sofa? Gu Yunxiao looked puzzled, stared at the assistant strangely, and said, "What are you talking about?" Gu Yunxiao soon understood that the assistant was not talking nonsense. On this day, a supernatural disappearance occurred in the Sky Academy. Yang Mengjiang, the leader of the course group of the practical lesson of the academy, mysteriously disappeared in Gu Yunxia's office. He seemed to disappear out of thin air with a sofa and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Gu Yunxia asked everyone and even adjusted the surveillance, but she didn't find Yang Mengjiang leaving, nor did she find him leaving with the sofa. It was in this office that Yang Mengjiang disappeared without warning and without a trace. Everyone in the entire Sky Academy was confused, and no one knew what happened. In the evening of the same day, Yuzhou City, in the Hidden Dragon Sea, the power center of Zhongzhou State, President Li Huacheng of Zhongzhou State personally convened a meeting of the decision-making committee. Zhuang Huayang, the headmaster of the Sky Academy, Fan Tianin, the Minister of Security of Zhongzhou State, was invited to attend the meeting. Gu Xingyun, the god of war of Zhongzhou State, who rarely attended such meetings, attended the meeting. The meeting discussed the death of Gu Changjiang, the director of Huading's Special Operations Bureau. Gu Xingyun took out the video. At the place where Gu Changjiang last disappeared, Dongqing Wudi, the commander of the Border Praetorian Corps, and Zhuang Huayang, the headmaster of the Sky Academy, appeared on the scene respectively. Gu Changjiang's body was not found, but the roughly estimated time of death was very consistent with the time when Dongqing Wudi and Zhuang Huayang appeared. The entire decision-making committee was waiting for the explanation of the two. Dongqing Wudi and Zhuang Huayang seriously clarified themselves one by one. Zheng Yongming, the top leader of Huading, was also a member of the decision-making committee. Although he was a little reluctant, he still proved that on the day they met, neither Dongqing Wudi nor Zhuang Huayang had any conflict with Gu Changjiang. It was just that Qin Weibai, the second in command of Samsara, had some unpleasantness with Gu Changjiang. This explanation was easily accepted by everyone. After all, whether it was Gu Changjiang, Zhuang Huayang, or Dongqing Wudi, they were all senior officials of Zhongzhou State. Not to mention that they did not have conflicts. Even if they did have conflicts, they would not be killed. Some basic rules were that everyone must abide by. So everyone's attention was focused in another direction. The time of Gu Changjiang's death was unclear, and the range of his death was relatively large. During this relatively long period of time, there was also another person who caught people's attention on the path that Gu Changjiang had taken. Moreover, this person definitely had the means to kill Gu Changjiang silently. The second master of the Jiang family of South America, Jiang Qinyan. Since a huge foreign force was involved, the tone of the people at the meeting was a little cautious. Finally, after Gu Xingyun said that he would investigate it clearly, the matter seemed to come to an end for the time being. But Gu Xingyun stopped blaming for the time being, and someone opened fire on Kunlun City. At the meeting of the highest level of the decision-making committee of the empire, Zhuang Huayang, in front of several directors and all the members, bluntly said that the atmosphere inside the Sky Academy was now very unhealthy, with crooked ways and foul atmosphere everywhere. In Gu Xingyun's gloomy face, Zhuang Huayang directly named Gu Yunxia. He thought that Gu Yunxia was suspected of fanning evil winds. His position was ambiguous. He ignored the overall situation, and he would not unite his colleagues. He almost belittled Gu Yunxia as useless. At the same time, he also cited that during the entrance maneuver, Lu Xiaowei attacked the freshmen, and in the actual combat lesson, the teachers targeted the freshmen. Fan Tianyin, the Minister of Security of Zhongzhou State and a cadre of the Southeast Group, also said that he had received a call from his son, Fan Haoyu. It was said that Fan Haoyu was now very insecure in the Sky Academy. Driven by some school leaders with ambiguous positions, he even felt that he was living under the terrible pressure of Kunlun City, not in the Sky Academy. General Dongxing Wudi, who had been holding back his anger because of the explanation, flew into a rage and said that there was something wrong with the environment of the Sky Academy. Even Zhuang Huayang, the headmaster, was responsible. He suggested that all Gu Yunxia's posts in the Sky Academy be revoked. In the face of Gu Xingyun, the famous god of massacre of Zhongzhou State pointed out the duties of the Sky Academy without hesitation. It was to cultivate talents in the special warfare system and the military system for Zhongzhou State, not to raise dogs for Kunlun City. Yi Dongsheng, one of the leaders of the Southeast Group and known as the God of Army, also expressed his support for Dongsheng Wudi with a cold face. The academics, the Giant Group, and the Wang family of Beihai. Because of a little thing that no one would notice at this time, the three parties reprimanded Gu Yunxia's behavior with harsh words, as if they had made an appointment. It was almost equivalent to pointing at the nose and rebuking Kunlun City for having bad intentions. A director of the Prince Group said a few words for Kunlun City in a perfunctory way, which could be regarded as a way to smooth things over. In the face of the storm of reprimands, Gu Xingyun, the god of war of Zhongzhou State, was expressionless all the time, as still as a mountain. But everyone at the meeting could see the flash of anger in his eyes. A storm suddenly arose in the conference room. The sky over Yuzhou City was covered with haze. Chapter 116. Tender yellow leaves poked out of the willows. Green pines and cypresses appeared among the dense needles. Buds sprouted on the crabapple trees, and the poplar trees grew taller and taller. The spring breeze swept over the lake, trees, pavilions, and lawns. The hidden dragon sea in early spring was picturesque, full of vitality. The spring scenery was boundless and beautiful. The Hidden Dragon Sea was the general name of the Hidden Sea and the Dragon Sea. It was said to be a sea, but in fact, it was just a small lake with clear water. In the center of power of Zhongzhou State, which was full of solemnity and solemnity, this lake, which was called a sea, could be said to be the softest place. Boating on the lake, even the greatest pressure seemed to disappear without a trace. In the morning, at the junction of the Hidden Sea and the Dragon Sea, two quaint boats drifted aimlessly with the waves. Gu Xingyun, the governor of Kunlun City, known as the war god of Zhongzhou State, sat in the boat with a fishing rod in his hand, looking calm and gentle. Gu Xingyun looked like he was in his 50s, with gray hair at the temples and an elegant appearance. His figure was not very strong and burly, and he didn't seem to have the arrogant and fierce momentum of the war god at all. Whether seen from a distance or up close, he looked like a very elegant and gentle middle-aged man, calm and collected, but he gave everyone a feeling of unfathomable in a trance. He put down the fishing rod in his hand, took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a puff. The smoke drifted and fell into the lake casually. Gu Xingyan quietly observed the hidden dragon sea, which was full of spring, with a soft smile and a happy spirit. Who could have thought that at the meeting of the decision-making committee last night, the war god of Zhongzhou State was jointly attacked by the three groups and almost embarrassed? On another wooden boat beside Gu Xingyan, a ferocious-looking, even ugly, one-eyed man kept observing Gu Xingyan's reaction. Seeing the smile on this war god's face, he subconsciously reached out his hand, touched his extremely eye-catching bald head, and said helplessly, "Your Highness, are we just going to let them do whatever they want?" Gu Xingyan, who seemed to have been thinking alone, slightly raised his eyebrows. This elegant old man, with a prominent identity and great power, was not sharp at all. His casual movement of raising his eyebrows immediately made him look more mature and charming. He took a puff of the cigarette and said with a smile, "What's your opinion, Fengbo?" Gu Fengbo. He was one of the deputy governors of Kunlun City and also the most important right-hand man of Gu Xingyan in the Hidden Dragon Sea. He was ugly. After losing an eye in a fierce battle many years ago, he looked even more ferocious, making people want to stay away from him at first sight. It seemed that his character had changed because of his appearance. He behaved cruelly and was very fond of unconventional methods, especially in recent years, as his strength surpassed the peak of the Thundershocking Realm and stayed between the fulfillment of the Thundershocking Realm and the half-step Invincible Realm. His style of doing things became more arrogant. He was notorious in the special warfare system. He was the most famous mad dog around Gu Xingyan, who would bite whoever he saw and would not let go until he was bitten to death. Since Gu Xingyan became the war god of Zhongzhou State, he had always been extremely steady. He cooperated with Gu Fengbo, who was surly and ruthless, and they had a tacit understanding. They could even be regarded as a golden partner. Years of friendship and tacit understanding made Gu Fengbo never treat Gu Xingyan as an outsider. He held the fishing rod in his hand and said coldly, "Who is Zhuang Huayang? He is an old man who dares to challenge your highness without weighing his own weight. Does he really think he is the same as he was 5 years ago? Your highness, I'm going to challenge Zhuang Huayang and find a chance to kill him. At worst, I'll disable him, which is also a lesson to others. If we don't take a stand this time, any Tom, Dick, or Harry will jump out and bother us. So we might as well take this opportunity to make an example of him." Gu Xingyan did not speak and seemed to be moved. He thought about it for 5 minutes, then shook his head slightly and said with a smile, "Headmaster Zhuang is not a chicken. 5 years ago, you were no match for him. 5 years ago, I just entered the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm. Naturally, I was no match for him." Gu Fengbo looked dissatisfied and wanted to say more, but he was directly interrupted by Gu Xingyan. "Even now, you are no match for Headmaster Zhuang 5 years ago. Forget it. The old headmaster has been in the Sky Academy for many years and has students all over the world. He is a hero to Zhongzhou State and the special warfare system. This is his last stop. I very much hope that he can reach the finish line safely." Gu Xingyan paused, looked at Gu Fengbo, who was still unconvinced and looked uglier, and said calmly, "I'm serious." Gu Fengbo gritted his teeth and did not speak. Zhuang Huayang State had declined severely in recent years, and he was even seriously inconsistent with the ranking of the top 10 contemporary experts in Zhongzhou State. This was a fact that everyone knew. 10 years ago was Zhuang Huayang's peak period. After Liu Tianqing's death, Zhuang Huayang ranked 4th among the top 10 contemporary experts in Zhongzhou State, second only to Wang Tianzong, Gu Xingyan, and Situ Cangyue. 5 years ago, the top 10 experts were ranked again. Gu Qianchuan, the first elder of Kunlun City, Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana Sword Master of Mount Shu, and Dongqing Wudi, the god of massacre of Zhongzhou State, surpassed Zhuang Huayang one by one. The ranking at that time was still true. But for an old man in his 70s, the most unforgiving thing was time. Another 5 years were coming. Zhuang Huayang's strength declined more and more seriously. He was old and frail. If he ranked again this year, it would be extremely difficult for him to get on the list. Gu Fengbo was a popular candidate for the top 10 experts this time. He hoped to defeat Zhuang Huayang and solidify his title as one of the top 10 experts in advance. At that time, Gu Xingyun, Gu Qianquan, and him would occupy 3 of the top 10 contemporary experts in Kunlun City. Who could compete with him? However, Gu Xingyun obviously did not want Zhuang Huayang to lose his integrity in his old age. During the 20 years in charge of the Sky Academy, Zhuang Huayang had sent away 6 generations of graduates. This was the real world with students. Gu Xingyun acted steadily. In the absence of benefits, he naturally did not want Gu Fengbo to attack Zhuang Huayang. Whether this matter succeeded or failed, it was likely to attract countless hostility, which was not what a wise man would do. So, let's just forget about it this time. Gu Fengbo took a deep breath, looked at Gu Xingyun, and waved his hand casually. A pack of cigarettes beside Gu Xingyun flew directly into his hand. He took one out and lit it silently. Forget it. Gu Xingyun nodded and said with a smile, "These years, the foundation of Kunlun City has become more and more stable, and there are more and more people against Kunlun City. What's the big deal about a few superficial reprimands? Bear it and be steady. There will always be a time to get back at them in the future." As for now, he narrowed his eyes slightly, and his eyes flickered, but they were still not the sharpness and decisiveness that belonged to the god of war. His eyes flickered with a kind of cunning and trickery that had experienced ups and downs. He took a drag on the cigarette and continued. "The urgent task now is to find out who killed Changjiang. I don't know why, when I think of this matter, I feel a little uneasy." Gu Fengbo said, "The task force has already gone to Huading." "Not enough." Gu Xingyun shook his head. "In a few days, I'm going to go to Huading in person. Within a month, this matter must come to light." Gu Fengbo took a deep breath and whispered to himself, "Dongqing Wudi, Zhuang Huayang, and even Jiang Xinyan, they all have enough strength to kill Changjiang." In addition, there were 2 freshmen of the Sky Academy who appeared at the scene that day. "These people are all suspects." Gu Xingyun took over and said, "But they are not very suspicious. The 2 freshmen may ignore it, but how can they kill Changjiang? Do you think the unique skills of Kunlun City are the so-called secret books casually painted by charlatans? As for Dongqing Wudi and Zhuang Huayang, I've talked to Zhong Yoming. They didn't have a direct conflict that day. Even if they're narrow-minded and want to kill, they won't do it so quickly. Those 2 old foxes won't be so imprudent. Samsara and Qin Weibai are the most likely. But even if they want to provoke, Qin Weibai won't directly choose Gu Changjiang as a breakthrough, and she went to the airport first. Gu Xingyun analyzed bit by bit, and finally there was only one name left. What about Jiang Xinyan? Gu Fengbo seemed to know what he was thinking and directly mentioned the name. He hesitated and continued. "A few days ago, First Elder seemed to be in Huading Crack. The fishing rod in Gu Xingyun's hand was directly crushed, and the fishing rod sank into the lake. A fish that had just been hooked escaped and escaped." Gu Xingyun was expressionless. He whispered to himself, "First Elder." In recent years, the foundation of Kunlun City had gradually stabilized, and some internal contradictions had gradually surfaced. For the Gu family, Gu Qianquan's bloodline was the real direct line, but now the power of Kunlun City was controlled by Gu Xingyun's bloodline. Gu Xingyun was unwilling to hand over power, and Gu Qianquan was unwilling to give up his orthodox status. Such contradictions were almost irreconcilable. And with the passage of time, without external pressure, these contradictions had become more and more obvious in recent years. As a confidant of the bloodline of the city governor, Gu Changjiang had always been at odds with Gu Qianquan. It was normal for him to want to kill Gu Changjiang. For many years, the Jiang family, a behemoth, had maintained a hazy connection with Kunlun City, both overtly and covertly. In fact, Gu Qianquan seemed to have a closer connection with them. But could this slightly closer relationship let Jiang Qinyan and the Jiang family participate in the internal fight of Kunlun City? Could it even let Jiang Qinyan, an expert of the invincible realm, personally clear the obstacles for Gu Qianxuan to seize power? Gu Fengbo seriously pondered for a while, shook his head, and said hesitantly, "First Elder can offer such a bargaining chip." "He can," Gu Xingyun said expressionlessly. "But does he really dare to offer such a bargaining chip?" A phone suddenly rang. Gu Xingyun took out his mobile phone and looked at the 3 words Gu Yunxia on the caller ID. He frowned slightly, picked it up, and chuckled. "Yunxia, what's the matter?" Gu Yunxia said something urgently on the other end of the phone. Gu Xingyun's smile suddenly disappeared. He silently put down the phone and narrowed his eyes. "Your Highness, what's the matter?" Gu Fengbo looked at him in confusion and asked. "Yun sect is dead," Gu Xingyun said. Looking at Gu Fengbo's suddenly cold and ferocious face, he continued. Meng Jiang mysteriously disappeared in Yunxia's office. There was no clue for a whole day. Gu Fengbo clenched his fists tightly, his face livid. What an eventful time. Gu Xingyun sighed softly. The air around him fluctuated slightly, and the ripples on the lake spread. The next second, his body had appeared by the lake. "Let's go to Huading right away. You come with me." Gu Fengbo stood up, jumped off the boat, and walked on the water. Monstrous waves shot around him with amazing momentum. At the same time, at the foot of Qingyun Peak of Kunlun Mountain, in the ice and snow thousands of meters above sea level, a figure wrapped in a black cloak appeared at the gate of Kunlun City. He carried a long sword and moved forward slowly. The city gate, which had been destroyed by Wang Tianzong's sword, had been urgently repaired in a few days. The black figure with a long sword looked at the busy figure at the city gate with mockery in his eyes. "Who are you? Stop!" The guards who repaired the city gate in front of the gate immediately found the black shadow in their sight and shouted loudly. The black shadow continued to move forward. The guards in front of the city gate suddenly became nervous. Dozens of people quickly gathered and said at the same time, "Stop." In their sight, the black shadow stopped as expected. However, before the guards could breathe a sigh of relief, the black shadow had already spoken directly. His voice shook the sky, and the wind and snow in the city flew wildly in the fierce sword intent. As his voice spread throughout the city, he said, "I'm Saint of Samsara, under the order of the Palace Master. I have a letter for His Highness, the God of War." He reached into his arms and took out an envelope. In the eyes of all the guards who suddenly became nervous, Saint stretched out his hand and waved it. The snow-white envelope instantly cut through the wind and snow. The wind howled, and the sword intent in the city rang. The envelope, like a white flowing light, shot straight to the city gate. There was a loud bang. In the wind and snow, the gate of Kunlun City, which had been urgently repaired, collapsed again. Gravel flew. Saint turned and left peacefully, not in a hurry. Several superiors of the thunder-shocking realm in Kunlun City appeared at the same time. They looked at the envelope on top of the pile of stones, and then at Saint's back, gloomy and silent. Who would want to provoke the first supermaster of Samsara, if possible? Skeleton, the thunder-shocking realm expert who had appeared when Wang Tianzong was about to enter the city, hesitated for a moment, reached out to take the envelope, and opened it. Only after a glance, his face changed dramatically. Gu Xingyin didn't go to Huading in person after all. Even Gu Fengbo didn't move. Because just when the two were about to leave, a message swept through every corner of the dark world at the speed of a hurricane. It was a letter from the master of Samsara Palace to the lord of Kunlun City. It was delivered by Saint. When the letter reached Gu Xingyun's ears, it also spread throughout the dark world. The whole dark world was instantly shocked, and the whole world was in an uproar. I heard that Kunlun City's martial arts is unparalleled in the world and is the pillar of martial arts in Zhongzhou State. I've admired it for a long time, so I came to ask for advice. Your Highness is the god of war of Zhongzhou State with unparalleled combat capability. You will not disappoint me, a woman. On June 15th, at the Sky Academy, I will wait for your Highness's arrival. I would like to see your Highness's elegant demeanor. I hope your Highness will not miss this opportunity. Swords and sabers have no eyes. I hope your Highness can put aside the worries of life and death and recreate the glory of Kunlun City. Although I am a woman and child, I am willing to let go of everything and discuss the pinnacle of martial arts with your Highness. I will not retreat until I die and will not rest until I die. If your Highness is defeated, I hope that your Highness will not be stingy with your head. It's fine if your Highness avoids the battle. You can just refer to yourself as a rat from now on. In the future, when I return to the East, I will slaughter the rats and destroy your Highness's rat nest. The glory of the Gu family for hundreds of years is tied to your Highness. I hope your Highness will consider it carefully. Signed by Samsara. They would not retreat until they were dead, and would not rest until they were dead. On June 15th, the Sky Academy. The entire Dark World thought that the master of Samsara Palace was crazy. The entire Dark World was also waiting for Gu Xingyun's reaction. On the same day that Gu Xingyun remained silent. In the northeast of Zhongzhou State. For the first time in many years, Situ Sangyue, the hidden god of Zhongzhou State, walked out of Sai City, Mount Aibai. She challenged Gu Qianchuan, the first elder of Kunlun City. It was almost the same wording as the master of Samsara Palace. Chapter 117. As one of the top wealthy families in Zhongzhou State, the Dongqing clan was extremely prosperous in Dongqing Wudi's generation. Dongqing Hongguang, the old master, also had 5 brothers, but 3 of them died on the battlefield. He and his younger brother, Dongqing Hanjian, had been supporting the huge Dongqing clan. At that time, the Dongqing clan was still a top wealthy and glorious family, but the pressure was not known to outsiders. In Dongqing Wudi's generation, the whole Dongqing clan really blossomed and bore fruit. Dongqing Wudi had 5 siblings: Wudi, Wushuang, Endless and Boundless, and Dongqing Wuqiu. Each of them was a real leader in their respective fields and could take charge of an area on their own. Even his wives and sons-in-law were all talents. Everyone in this generation of the Dongqing clan was not useless. Because of this, the Dongqing clan was now more prosperous than ever. The leader of the Dongqing clan today was Dongqing Wudi, a member of the decision-making committee known as the God of Massacre in Zhongzhou State. Although he was not a director giant, the only director giant in the giant group often followed Dongqing Wudi's opinion, which showed the status of the Dongqing clan in the giant group. If it weren't for the fact that Dongqing Wudi had no decent men in the next generation and only relied on the 2 sisters, Dongqing Qiuqi and Dongqing Rushi, the momentum of the Dongqing clan today would be even more amazing. That was really carrying on the past and opening up the future. It was drizzling in Luojing. Tiny raindrops fell on the sky above the ancient capital of the 13 dynasties, beautiful and tranquil. An Audi with a military license plate slowly drove out of the airport and went all the way along the airport expressway. After crossing most of the urban area of Luojing, it went straight to the suburbs at a steady pace. The mountain that symbolized supreme power in Luojing was getting closer and closer. The mountain rain was hazy. There was a vast silence between heaven and earth. On both sides of the mountain road, soldiers in raincoats with loaded guns stood motionless, silent, and piercingly cold. The mountain occupied by the Dongqing clan was said to be a military restricted zone. A regiment of troops was stationed here all year round. From the head of the regiment to each soldier, although the establishment number was under the name of the Zhongyuan military region, the Dongqing clan was responsible for all the living and wages of these veterans transferred from the Border Praetorian Corps. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was the Dongqing clan's private army. The Audi with the military license plate passed by the sign engraved with the words Military Restricted Zone. The 2 rows of veterans guarding the intersection of the mountain road turned around at the same time and gestured for the Audi to stop. The Audi slowly came to a stop. The captain of the veteran squad quickly walked to the driver's seat and before he could reach out to knock on the window had already rolled down. An extremely burly figure appeared in the captain's line of sight. This was a young man who looked to be in his 30s. He was dressed in a military uniform and had a resolute expression on his face. His body was so huge that it was almost majestic. Even though he was sitting in the car, the captain could clearly sense the other party's surging and suffocating power. The captain glanced at the lieutenant colonel insignia and subconsciously wanted to salute. However, the majestic young man had already slowly said, "Make way. Mrs. Dongsheng is in the car." Mrs. Dongsheng? The captain was stunned subconsciously. He had been in the Dongsheng clan for nearly 5 years and naturally knew the important figures of the Dongsheng clan very well. Now, several madams of Dongsheng seemed to be on the mountain. How could another madam of Dongsheng appear here? The captain was still in a daze. The rear window of the Audi had slowly rolled down, and a very soft and gentle voice sounded from the back. "Is it old Sue? When I went to the border camp, I saw you beside Woody. Woody said that you took a bullet for him on the battlefield. Why were you transferred here from the Border Control Corps?" Old Sue turned his head in disbelief. In the back of the car, through the rolled-down window, a woman who looked only about 30 years old was looking at him with a smile. This was a woman who could hardly be described as beautiful. If one had to add a word to her, it could only be beautiful. A woman who was so beautiful that people would feel awe. She was dressed in a decent lady's suit and had her hair tied up. Every move she made was indescribably graceful and luxurious. The peonies in Luo-Jing were the best in the world, and she was like the most beautiful peonies in Luo-Jing. She was dignified, elegant, gentle, and kind. Her beautiful face seemed a little haggard, but when her eyes moved, there was only a faint dignity that could make people feel pressure, in addition to amiability. Old Sue's whole body trembled with excitement. The rain beat on the raincoat, pitter-patter. Under the rain, Old Sue suddenly stood up straight, saluted, and said loudly, "Secretary Bai." The woman nodded gently, coughed, and said with a smile, "I've caught a bad cold recently, so I won't get out of the car. We're on the same side, so there's no need to be so polite, right?" Yes, yes. Secretary Bai's health is important. You must pay more attention." Old Sue nodded repeatedly and spoke almost incoherently. He suddenly turned around, waved his hand, and said, "Get out of the way. Secretary Bai is back." Several soldiers immediately got out of the way. The Audi slowly walked past Old Sue. When it brushed past the car, Old Sue narrowed his eyes. He could vaguely see a young woman who looked somewhat similar to Secretary Bai sitting next to her. She was casually playing with a dagger with a piercing cold glint in her eyes. Old Sue shook his head, pulled a soldier over, suppressed the ecstasy in his heart, and said, "Hurry up, call the regimental commander and tell him that Secretary Bai is back. Ask him to tell the old master quickly." In the entire Zhongzhou state, there was only one Mrs. Dongsheng who could be called Secretary Bai. She was an extraordinary woman in the political arena of Zhongzhou state. She was Dongsheng Wudi's wife, but she was not a vassal of Dongsheng Wudi. Even when the two stood together, people could also see the sky that belonged to her when they admired the temperament of the god of massacre. Bai Qingxian, the former governor of Qinzhou province in Zhongzhou state and the current secretary of Guangdong province, used to be the first miss of the Bai family, and now Mrs. Dongsheng. Old Sue took a deep breath. As a veteran transferred from the Border Control Corps, they had long given their faith and soul to the Dongsheng clan. Anything worth being happy about in this top wealthy family was also worth celebrating for them. Bai Qingqian's arrival in the Dongsheng clan was a happy event for the entire Dongsheng clan. Old Sue chuckled foolishly and lit a cigarette. He took a puff happily and felt very comfortable. He had heard the old people here talk about the marriage of their marshal in private. It was said that at the beginning, the marshal and his wife were very loving. They had been attached to each other for several years after they met and got married. His wife was a high-ranking female official with a bright future outside, but at home, she was the most gentle and filial young mistress. She loved her husband, was filial to her parents-in-law, and never had any dissatisfaction. Now the relationship between the marshal and his wife was stable, but it was no longer the same as it was many years ago. According to some veterans who had stayed here for many years ago, for some unknown reason, his wife had a great conflict with Dongsheng Hongguang and even broke up completely. All of a sudden, they were almost incompatible like fire and water, and even his wife's attitude toward the marshal became cold. His wife also moved down the mountain from that time. A few years later, the marshal used some unknown means to ease the relationship with his wife. His wife also came back for a New Year's Eve dinner. Since then, no one had seen his wife come back. Over the years, even if the marshal and his wife met, they were mostly at their respective workplaces. If one counted carefully, this situation had lasted for almost 20 years. No one knew why his wife broke up with the old master, and no one dared to ask. Over time, everything about Bai Qingqian seemed to have disappeared from the mountain of the Dongsheng clan. If Bai Qingqian hadn't met Old Su when she went to the Border Control Corps to visit Dongsheng Wudi 5 years ago, Old Su wouldn't even have recognized Bai Qingqian. Old Su grinned. For the first time in more than a decade, his wife came home. In any case, this was a good sign. The Audi drove all the way through the lush path in the mountain. The mountains and rivers were hazy, and so was the misty rain. Bai Qingqian silently looked out of the window at the strange and familiar mountain scenery and said nothing. A woman who seemed to be 25 or 26 years old sat lazily beside Bai Qingqian, casually trimming her nails with a dagger, and said with a smile, "Aunt, the Dongqing clan has changed a lot, hasn't it? I remember I came here once when I was a child, when I was only 11 or 12 years old. After that, we didn't come back here, and I didn't come back either. Ah, by the way, you seem to come back once later. My father was so angry at that time that he almost came to kill you." The woman's appearance looked similar to Bai Qingqian's. Sitting together, they looked like a pair of charming sisters, but their temperaments were completely opposite. Bai Qingqian seemed to have a kind of graceful and noble atmosphere and gentleness at any time, while the woman sitting next to Bai Qingqian only gave people a clear feeling of coldness and danger. It was a kind of almost overwhelming momentum, which made it easy for people to ignore that she was actually very beautiful. Bai Yuming of the Bai family in Yuzhou, known as the Little God of Massacre, was the niece of Bai Qingqian, the top leader of Yuzhou City, the eldest daughter of Bai Zhanfeng, a member of the decision-making committee and the first miss of the Bai family. This year, First Miss Bai, who was nearly 33 years old, was still alone. She did not attract countless young talents like her aunt did in the past. She even rarely appeared in public, but in the eyes of some real big shots, Bai Yuming was a very important figure. At the age of 33, she was an expert who was about to enter the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in the stabilization phase, and was as famous as Wang Xiaoyao of the Wang family of Beihai. Just this point alone was enough to prove that she was extremely talented. Bai Yuming was not called Bai Yuming before. Only a few people knew that the ghostly name Yuming came from the mouth of Great Master Wu Wei, the most respected old monk in Zhongzhou State, and it was Great Master Wu Wei who personally came to give her a name. This honor could not be refused by the Bai family at all. What's more, what Great Master Wu Wei said when he gave her a name was somewhat shocking, so the Bai family had to accept this extremely strange name. This woman is extremely lucky, but when she reaches the peak, she will decline. She will die early, so she should be buffered by Yin Qi. The word Yuming is the most suitable. This was the original words of Great Master Wu Wei. Since then, the name Bai Yuming had been fixed. Now Bai Yuming, who was 33 years old, had been very smooth since she was a child. Although she was not famous in Yuzhou, in the dark world, the title of Little God of Massacre was extremely resounding. Her progress in martial arts seemed to indicate that she was extremely lucky. "Aunt, do you remember you took me here to play when I was a child? There seems to be a water garden on the mountain, right? Let's go and have a look later." Bai Yuming looked at Bai Qingqian, who was silent, and continued to say with a smile. Bai Qingqian shook her head and said softly, "I have long forgotten where it is." They had not contacted each other for more than 10 years. Not to mention the water garden, she could hardly remember where the old man lived. Bai Yuming sighed softly and said no more. It had always been a mystery why her aunt broke up with the old master of the Dongchang clan over the years. Even when she returned to her parents' home, no matter how her father asked, her aunt refused to say a word. If it were not for her aunt's unchanged attitude in supporting the Dongchang clan, perhaps the Bai family and the Dongchang clan, the two pillar families of the giant group, would have publicly broken up. Chapter 118. There's one more chapter, 2 in a row. Don't miss it. In the wind and rain, the Audi sped up and went straight to the top of the mountain. In front of the villa on the top of the mountain, umbrellas were leaning against each other. Under the curtain of rain, led by Dongchang Hongwang, Dongcheng Wudi, Thunder God, Uncle and the servants in the villa all came out to welcome Bai Qingxian, who had not been back for more than 10 years. Bai Qingxian looked at this scene quietly with calm eyes. Aunt, you're so important that the old master came out to welcome you in person. Do you think he will hold the umbrella for you later? The Audi slowly stopped in front of the villa. Bai Qingxian opened the door with indifferent eyes and said calmly, "Why do we need others to hold the umbrella? Don't we have our own umbrella?" The young man who was driving had already walked out of the driver's seat with an umbrella. Dongcheng Hongwang, who had walked over with an umbrella, paused subconsciously, and the others also stopped. They were not afraid, but the impact of the young man who got out of the driver's seat was too strong. He was a strong man in the real sense. Nearly 2 meters tall, he was tall and straight. His body was almost beyond the range of fat and thin. His whole body was full of explosive muscles, indescribably strong and tough. He held the umbrella and opened the door. His expression was calm, but there was a force constantly emanating from him. This man had no momentum. The only thing people could think of when they saw him was his pure strength, which seemed to be able to tear tigers and leopards. This kind of strength ignored realms and had nothing to do with combat effectiveness. His burly and thick body casually stood there, giving people a suffocating sense of oppression. Su Chu, Dongcheng Wudi, who followed Dongcheng Hongwang, raised his eyebrows and looked surprised. This is the first disciple of your jade pool. Dongcheng Hongwang looked at the young man in front of him, who could even make him feel a strong sense of oppression, with a face full of admiration. The first disciple of Jade Pool, Su Chu, codenamed Giant God, was born with thunder vein and had unparalleled courage. With the strength at the peak of the fire-flaming realm, he could fight against a thunder-shocking realm expert. He was worthy of being called a fierce general. Su Chu, who is 30 years old this year, had been staying in Jade Pool for many years. He had no official position and rarely went down the mountain. He was even a nobody in the outside world. Dongcheng Hongwang had heard about this fierce talent from his son. Now feeling the surging power in his body, the old master suddenly felt that he deserved his reputation. But why was the eldest disciple of the Jade Pool by Qingqian's side, and even became his chauffeur? Little martial uncle. Uncle. Su Chu, who was holding an umbrella, glanced at Dongcheng Wudi and said hello to Bai Yuming, who got off the car. You, Dongcheng Wudi frowned. As soon as he opened his mouth, he saw Bai Qingxian in a black suit and trousers get out of the car and stand under the umbrella in Su Chu's hand. Graceful, luxurious, and colorful. In an instant, as she got out of the car, the gloomy sky seemed to brighten up. Dongcheng Wudi immediately stopped talking. He looked at the old master beside him and whispered, "Dad." Every time after a meeting in Yuzhou, he would go home for a day and then go to the border camp. Today was a coincidence that Bai Qingxian came home. Dongcheng Wudi was surprised and wanted to take this opportunity to ease the relationship between his wife and his father. Dongcheng Hongwang's eyes had already moved away from Su Chu and fell on Bai Qingxian. He held the umbrella tightly in his hand and took a step forward. The old man, who had been fearless all his life, suddenly felt a little timid and nervous at this moment. His eyes gradually became complicated. He was no longer calm, but a little guilty and helpless. Bai Qingxian stood quietly and looked at Dongcheng Hongwang, expressionless and silent. "You're back." Dongcheng Hongwang pretended to be natural and greeted her. Bai Qingqian nodded and said directly, I have a favor to ask. Okay. Dongcheng Hongguang nodded with a smile and didn't ask what it was. He said kindly, let's go in first. It's still a little cold outside. No need. Bai Qingqian said indifferently, just a few words. I'll leave after that. Dongcheng Hongguang and Dongcheng Wudi's faces changed at the same time. She went up the mountain, but didn't enter the door and didn't give any explanation. This was enough to show that even if Bai Qingqian took the initiative to go up the mountain this time, it was not because she wanted to, but because she had to. She hadn't come back for more than 10 years. Now, even if she came back, she was unwilling to enter the door. This was no longer a problem that could be explained by the knot in her heart. This was resentment, the most naked, resolute, and helpless resentment. A strong look of pain flashed in Dongcheng Hongguang's eyes. He opened his mouth and murmured to himself, let's go in first. It's cold outside. At this moment, the old master was no longer the once all-powerful director of the decision-making committee, nor was he the old patriarch of the Dongcheng clan. He was the most ordinary old man, guilty, helpless, and painful, but he didn't know how to be forgiven. Perhaps he couldn't forgive her. I could have gone in. Bai Qingqian gently raised the corner of her mouth. She was still so noble and graceful, but her smile was full of a kind of chilling coldness. A week ago, Dongcheng Hongguang's mouth twitched, and he stood where he was in a daze. Even his hand holding the umbrella was slightly trembling. A week ago, that was the time when Li Tianlan came here. Did anyone inform me when you picked him up from Huading? Where were you when he was seriously injured in Huading? Where were you when he was targeted in the Sky Academy? Yes, you were all on the mountain, standing so high. The scenery is very good, isn't it? Every word was heart-wrenching. Bai Qingqian's expression grew colder, with a kind of deep-rooted hatred. Qingqian, Dongcheng Wudi opened his mouth with a bitter smile. As soon as he called out her name, Bai Qingqian had directly interrupted him. Shut up. She looked coldly at Dongcheng Wudi and then at Dongcheng Hongguang, saying with a disdainful face, the god of massacre family? Military giant? Are you men? Ahem, ahem, ahem. In the wind and rain, her body trembled slightly, and she violently coughed. Let's talk inside. Dongcheng Hongguang continued to speak, and his tone was weak, almost pleading. Bai Qingqian smiled coldly. She took a deep breath and said calmly, when I came out of here more than 10 years ago, I told myself that I was still the daughter-in-law of the Dongcheng clan. I would fulfill the responsibilities and obligations of this identity, and my ashes could also be buried with Wudi. But as long as I'm alive, I will never step into this door. If I break this oath, I am willing to be struck by lightning and die. Resolute, mournful, and without the slightest leeway. As soon as she said this, everyone's expression changed dramatically. Bai Yuming looked at her aunt in disbelief. It was not until this moment that she realized that the secret that her aunt and the Dongcheng clan had hidden for many years seemed to be more serious than she had imagined. If she took one step into the door, she would be willing to be struck by lightning and die. How desperate must a woman be to make such a vicious oath? Thunder rolled across the sky. Bai Qingqian took a step forward and walked directly out of the umbrella in Su Chu's hand. The cold rain fell on her, wetting her body and pale cheeks. She looked up at the gloomy sky. Thunder rumbled across the sky. Bai Qingqian suddenly smiled, desolate and brilliant. She looked at Dongcheng Hongguang in front of her and said word by word, "It's thunder. Are you so eager for me to die?" Dongcheng Hongguang staggered back a step, his face pale, and said painfully, "I'm sorry. The Dongcheng clan is sorry to you." Bai Qingqian smiled tremblingly and suddenly said calmly, "The Dongcheng clan has owed me for many years." "Old master, don't you think so?" Dongcheng Hongguang nodded, his face pale. "Okay." Bai Qingqian said, "You owe me for so many years. Today you pay it back." Su Chu is going to enter the Sky Academy as a student. Isn't there one less instructor for the actual combat lesson in the Sky Academy? I think Yu Ming is very suitable. Dongcheng Wudi, who was as bitter as his father, frowned and said subconsciously, "Qingqian, do Do you want to? I don't want to. Bai Qingxian glanced at him and said coldly, I'm doing it. I have to do it. I know you care about Tianlan. He's my son-in-law. I know what to do. He's your son-in-law. He's only your son-in-law, not mine. Bai Qingxian's cold eyes fell directly on Dong Xingwudi. Dong Xingwudi's heart suddenly sank. The last time he saw his wife's eyes like this, she hadn't said a word to him for several years. This time, I'll do my best, Dongqing Hongguang finally said in a hoarse voice. Bai Qingxian nodded and turned to get into the Audi. Bai Yuming and Su Chu got in the car at the same time. When the car turned around and left, the only female provincial leader in Zhongzhou State rolled down the window again and said calmly, When Tianlan married my daughter, I came back to attend the wedding. This mountain is too much of an eyesore. I don't like it. The Audi went down the mountain in the wind and rain and went away. Dongqing Hongguang stood there with an umbrella and didn't move for a long time. Dad, Dongqing Wudi cried. The marshal of Zhongzhou State was ruthless when facing the enemy, but he was a complete mess when dealing with his own family affairs. He didn't have the demeanor of a god of slaughter at all. Say no more. Dongqing Hongguang took a deep breath and said calmly, Do as Qingxian said. Su Chu's matter is easy. You have to fight for the position of the leader of the actual combat corps for the girl of the Bai family. Dongqing Wudi nodded, then shook his head with a wry smile. This was the most difficult thing to do. Zhuanghuayang State was declining. Kunlun City was ambitious in the composition of this year's Sky Academy. Lu Xiaowei and Yang Mengjiang were both forcibly inserted by Kunlun City in order to take the leadership of the Sky Academy after Zhuanghuayang retired. But now Lu Xiaowei was dead and Yang Mengjiang disappeared mysteriously. Kunlun City's influence in the Sky Academy had suffered heavy losses. In the next period of time, the personnel changes in the Sky Academy were bound to be the focus of the special warfare system. Tribulation had not adapted to Lu Xiaowei's position, and now it was very likely that he would be further in charge of the political department. The Wang family of Beihai would definitely get the position of deputy director of teaching left by Tribulation. This was part of the deal. As for Yang Mengjiang's position, if Kunlun City let go again, Gu Yinxia's strength would be greatly damaged, and her voice in the Sky Academy would be even weaker. How could it be easy to take Yang Mengjiang's position from Kunlun City? A phone suddenly rang. Dongqing Wudi picked up the phone and listened for a while. Then his eyes narrowed. He thought for a while and said softly, Dad, it's Little Five. The master of Samsara Palace suddenly issued a letter of challenge to Kunlun City. On June 15th, she will fight with Gu Xingyun in the Sky Academy to the death. Sai City also took action. Situ Sangyue has made an appointment to fight with Gu Qianchuan. The place has not been decided yet, but it will also be a fight to the death. Little Five was Dongqing Wuchou, who ranked 5th in Dongqing Wudi's generation. Now he was the minister of the 2nd Department of the General Staff Headquarters of Zhongzhou State, which was the legendary military intelligence department. Naturally, the news he got was the most accurate and fast. Dongqing Hongguang, who was a little lost, froze for a moment and then instinctively narrowed his eyes. The thing about Bai Yuming, this is an opportunity. He was silent for a while before he slowly opened his mouth. Dongqing Wudi was stunned. He understood what Dongqing Hongguang meant, but he couldn't believe it. Dad, as the god of war of Zhongzhou State, Gu Xing doesn't even have the courage to fight with the master of Samsara Palace? Of course he has the courage to fight, but does he dare to fight to the death? Does Zhongzhou State dare? Chapter 119. There was an autumn pond on Mount Dibbing. It was called a pond, but in fact, it was a river winding down from the mountainside with a length of 6 or 7 kilometers. The autumn pond was located in a low terrain with a radius of 100 meters in the middle of the river. The water was clear, just like a treasure pond. The autumn pond was not big, but it had its own scenery in 4 seasons. It was gentle and beautiful. When everything was revived, the clear water flowed, and the ripples in the pond were turbulent. The green mountains, white clouds, and green trees were clearly reflected in the water. The gentle wind blew with sweet moisture. It was picturesque and beautiful. It could make immortals forget their worries and teach mortals to forget their customs. Summer River and Autumn Pond. This was a private scenery that belonged only to Mount Dibbing and the Wang family of Beihai. At first glance, it might not be amazing, but when looking back, people were already immersed in it. Lin Fengding liked this kind of scenery very much. He was about to reach the age of knowing his destiny, and he had been traveling all his life, either by himself or with his wife and children. When a person had peerless martial arts but no ambition, he just wanted to live an incognito life and had endless money to spend. He could really live a comfortable life however he wanted. In the past few decades, Lin Fengding had traveled around the world. He had seen too many enchanting sceneries of verdant hills and limpid waters. He had seen too many magnificent spectacles of blooming flowers. He had seen too many magnificent scenes. To enter the fire-flaming realm, he went straight to the polar region. To enter the invincible realm, he climbed Mount Everest alone. His life was really too full and rich, leisurely and wonderful. But no matter how many places he had been to, in his heart, in front of him, Mount Dibbing was the most worry-free pool. The lake and the mountain were beautiful, and the water was hazy. This situation and this scenery were the most unique and natural. I really don't want to leave. I've been sitting here for a day, and I even forgot the way home. Lin Fengding sat quietly on the green and soft grass and sighed softly. His tone was soft, with a trace of imperceptible sadness. Then stay here. Wang Tianzong sat beside Lin Fengding and said with a chuckle, "You can choose any palace on Mount Dibbing, even if you want the Sword Emperor Palace where I live. But you have to wait for them to repair it." Lin Fengding turned his head and glanced at him. He put aside the fishing rod in his hand and let the fish that had bitten the hook struggle to escape under the water. He took out a cigarette and handed it to Wang Tianzong. He shook his head and said, "If I really live in Mount Dibbing, I'm afraid I can't see any scenery. There's always time." Wang Tianzong said seriously, "It's not a big deal, and you don't need to do anything about it. You can live a stable life now. If you want, how about hanging the title of Lord Equal in the Wang family of Beihai? Your order is my order for everything in the Wang family of Beihai." He stood side by side with Sword Emperor in the Wang family of Beihai. Such an honor was simply supreme. Not to mention others. Even among all the invincible realm experts in the Dark World, there were few who could refuse this condition. Lin Fengding shook his head and said calmly, "Forget it. I'm not the kind of person who can sit still. I don't want to participate in your affairs. It's exhausting. How can it be as refreshing as me to do whatever I want?" Wang Tianzong sighed softly and didn't say much. When the Li family was destroyed, Lin Fengding, who was of the same origin as the Li family, didn't stand up. Instead, he let the martial arts force founded by the ancestors of the Lin family disappear bit by bit. With such a mentality, the other party obviously made up his mind not to participate in the game of the Dark World. If he insisted too much, what good would it do? Wang Tianzong was a little lost in thought. Over the past 500 years, the Wang family of Beihai and Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun had produced 9 successive generations of invincible realm experts. But no one knew that the Lin family, where Lin Fengding was, also produced 9 successive generations of invincible realm experts. In the shining years of glory and honor, the Wang family of Beihai, in Zhuanyuantai of Kunlun, every invincible realm expert was famous in the world. But what about the invincible realm experts of the Lin family? They traveled all day long and lived in seclusion. No matter how the outside world changed, they remained motionless. 9-generation invincible realm experts. Except for their ancestors, no one else entered the human world. They came and went quietly. No matter how time went by, no matter how the wind and clouds surged. What kind of transcendent elegance was this? Wang Tianzong lit a cigarette, shook his head, and said, "Where are you going next?" "Go back to Europe and wander around. Chu Shue wants to go to the Vatican." She said she wanted to see the headquarters of the Vatican. I may take her there. Lin Fengting said casually with the cigarette but in his mouth. To the Vatican? Wang Tianzong said with a playful smile. You caused a lot of trouble there in the past few years, didn't you? I heard that their pope has issued an arrest warrant. Arsis has been chasing you for several days, but you still managed to escape. The news from Italy is vague, but I guess it's you. How do you know? Lin Fengting looked embarrassed. There was really nothing glorious about it. Besides, it had been 5 or 6 years, and he almost forgot it. You sold the Tao Te Ching in front of the Apostolic Palace, and you set up a stall to tell people's fortunes. Who else could it be except you? No wonder the Pope denounced you as a heretic. And how many heretics in the world can Arsis not catch up with? Saint Arsis, Saint War Angel of the Vatican, ranked second on the World Divine list, second only to the Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong. The representative of the Vatican's force chased him for several days and finally failed to catch up with him. Wang Tianzong casually thought about it and knew it was Lin Fengting by elimination. Ahem. Lin Fengting coughed and suddenly looked around. This handsome middle-aged man suddenly had a trace of wretchedness. He said with a sneaky smile, I tell you, don't sell me out. That bastard chased me for 3 days and almost chased me out of the border of Italy. Later, I went to the Vatican again and beat him up when he was not paying attention. Haha, cool. Wang Tianzong's mouth twitched. He didn't know this news. Not to mention the strength of Lin Fengting and Arsis. Lin Fengting dared to go deep into the Vatican to beat Arsis, which showed that Lin Fengting was lawless and did whatever he wanted. And the Vatican naturally wouldn't publicize this matter. It was not a good thing for their Saint War Angel to be beaten up. Prepare a plane ticket for me. I'll leave tonight. I'll go to Yuzhou first, then the border, and then back. Lin Fengting said lazily, playing with the fishing rod in his hand. I thought you would go to Huading. Wang Tianzong turned his head and took a deep look at Lin Fengting, chuckling. Lin Fengting was silent for a while and then shook his head. I wanted to see the descendant of the Li family of this generation, but I gave up after thinking about it. I didn't want to enter the secular world. What's the use of going there? I don't want to, so I won't give him any hope. Wang Tianzong thought for a while and said, The sword you owe the Li family. I'll pay it back when the time is right. Lin Fengting shook his head and repeated Li Tianlan's name twice. Suddenly, he said, How are you going to deal with Li Tianlan? I gave him a set of immortality. Wang Tianzong said expressionlessly, Even if the Wang family owes the Li family too much, the immortality has been paid off. From now on, we don't owe each other anything. If we become enemies in the future, we'll kill him. Lin Fengting moved the corner of his mouth and tentatively said, With Yue Tong by his side, in the future, Wang Tianzong's expression didn't change. He just quietly looked at the water of the where-forgotten pool in front of him. At this moment, he seemed to be far away from Lin Fengting. He was no longer Lin Fengting's childhood friend, but the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, who ranked on the divine list. Ambitious. A word suddenly appeared in Lin Fengting's mind, and his eyes became a little dispirited. He stretched out his hand and pointed downstream, whispering, The hot spring at the foot of the mountain is still there, right? The Xia River of Mount Dibbing flowed around the mountain. The autumn pond in front of them made people forget their worries. The area at the end of the downstream was natural geothermal. The Wang family changed a medium-sized hot spring there, which was not open to the public. It was only used occasionally during private leisure time. It's still there. Wang Tianzong's expression softened a little, and he whispered, In fact, standing here, the most impressive thing for me is when I was a child. Lin Fengting said softly, looking absent-minded and soft. I was 9 years old that year. Second brother was 11, and you were 12, right? When my father took me to Mount Dibbing for the first time, he said that he would introduce 2 good brothers to me. Uncle Wang took you to pick us up, and then we picked up Uncle Li together. At that time, the 3 brothers were soaking in the hot spring below, and we peed in the water above. Oh, that should be the last time the 3 of them and the 3 of us got together, right? Later, I saw a second brother alone, and I also saw you alone, but we didn't get together. Later, second brother committed treason and died at the border until now. His voice lowered and finally became silent. How many years has it been? Wang Tianzong tightly pursed his lips and said nothing. I always remember the 3 words, good brother. Lin Fengding paused and finally said, big brother. When Wang Tianzong was about to speak, the phone suddenly rang. He answered the phone and said indifferently, hello. Lin Fengding looked at him quietly. Until he hung up the phone and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He said calmly, what's the matter? There's a very interesting thing. Wang Tianzong said softly. On June 15th, the master of Samsara Palace challenged Gu Xingyan in the Sky Academy to a life-and-death battle. Situ Sanyue also joined in the fun and challenged Gu Qianchuan. Interesting. This year's special warfare system and the Dark World are getting more and more interesting. Lin Fengting's eyes lit up slightly, and then he frowned and said, has the master of Samsara Palace recovered from her injury? June 15th? It's estimated that it's difficult for her to fully recover in more than a month. Wang Tianzong was silent and did not speak. His eyes kept flickering, and he looked thoughtful. What do you think? Lin Fengting waited for a while and continued to ask. He lived in seclusion and knew far less about the general trend of Zhongzhou State and the Dark World than Wang Tianzong, who was involved in the game. But he had to pay special attention to the master of Samsara Palace. The master of Samsara Palace could pour out the 24 moves of sword, the core unique skill of Zhuanyuan Tai of Kunlun. What was the relationship between her and the Li family? I don't know. Huading has been a little busy recently. Maybe she wanted to stand up for Li Tianlan, but not entirely. The divine list would be re-ranked next year. She challenged Gu Xingyun to increase her ranking. The higher her ranking was, the more Samsara would gain after destroying Night Spirit. Otherwise, who would be willing to destroy Night Spirit only to benefit others in the end after all the hard work? From the perspective of Zhongzhou State, the academics may secretly instigate the decisive battle between Samsara and Gu Xingyun. Gu Xingyun dares to fight, but he will not easily fight to the death. The inside story behind the upcoming battle is complicated. Wang Tianzong sighed softly. Even though he was the Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, it was difficult for him to grasp the specific trend of the general trend until the truth came to light. The academics secretly instigated. The master of Samsara Palace is not stupid. She is seriously injured. Does she really think that Gu Xingyun, the 4th on the divine list, is just a decoration? Lin Fengting frowned subconsciously. Wang Tianzong glanced at him and chuckled. Don't forget that her surname used to be Gu. Her surname used to be Gu, but she mastered the unique skill of the Li family. Lin Fengting's eyes lit up. I'm going to Huading to watch the fun. I don't know how many overseas Invincible Realm experts want to watch the battle. Do you want to go and have a look? It's okay to stay for 1 more month, right? Wang Tianzong looked at Lin Fengting and said with a smile. Okay. Lin Fengting hesitated for a while and finally said excitedly, you go and arrange it first. I'll wait for you at the foot of the mountain. Wang Tianzong nodded and took a step forward. Then he disappeared instantly. Lin Fengting sat there and smoked a cigarette quietly. When it was almost time, he picked up the fishing rod and shook it casually. There was no fish on the hook, but the water of the entire carefree pool rose with the movement of his hand. A large amount of water rushed to the sky dozens of meters high in the twinkling of an eye, like a water curtain. The water curtain was clear and sparkling in the sunlight. Lin Fengting's figure stayed in the water curtain for a while and then disappeared in an instant. The water in the pool suddenly fell, splashing, and the rumbling sound echoed in the mountains. A sigh floated in the deafening sound of the water, vague and clear. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.